The story starts in a palace, where the emperor, who goes by Sylvanus, announces that his eldest daughter, Princess Artine, is getting married. People believe that even though she's a princess, her dad is making her marry some barbarian. They think the emperor prefers his other daughter over Artine. Basically, her father, who is also the emperor, wants to use Artine to benefit himself by marrying her off to the enemy kingdom called Iugo. After a month, Artine leaves for Iugo. She acts obedient and doesn't rebel against her father. But let's be real. She's probably just pretending. You can tell by her big smile and the way she flicks her finger that she's actually happy to leave that place. She's finally free. Speaking of freedom, she's actually relieved to escape from her super unpleasant father. Artine's father, who happened to be the emperor, put her through all sorts of torture in his eagerness to make her a success. One day, she woke up to a horrifying scene. The windows were blocked, and flames were engulfing the room. If she had woken up just a little later, she would have died. Can you believe it? Artine was only 6 years old at the time. When her evil father saw her looking like a burnt piece of coal, he had this wicked grin on his face. He was just curious to see if Artine had unlocked some special power or not. That poor little girl was shocked to the core. She realized that her crazy father had deliberately blocked the windows and set the fire for some twisted reason. Compared to her charred lungs and wounds, her father's actions hurt her heart the most. And that's not all. There was some kind of incident involving her sister that landed Artine in prison for a whole 10 years. But you know what? That dark moment actually allowed Artine to uncover her past life while she was confined. Now, though, she's faced with the challenge of dealing with her future in Iugo. Iugo, it's like a place straight out of a crazy fantasy tale. Fire and iron rule that joint, and it's surrounded by some demonic beasts. Those barbarians they're a real wild bunch. Some even get freaky with the beasts. It's hard to say if they're fully human or just some half-beast hybrids. The Sylvanus always prided themselves on being conquerors, but there was one place they just couldn't crack. Iugo. Artine's father wanted to be the big shot who finally conquered Iugo, but he totally failed. And you know why? It was all because of Tarkin, Artine's soon-to-be husband. Sylvanus figured they'd be screwed if they kept waging war, so they proposed a ceasefire. I mean, Iugo is stuck on this plain surrounded by demonic beasts, so it's a real hassle to keep fighting. Iugo accepted the ceasefire and suggested a political marriage. That marriage would mark the end of their long-ass feud and create a new alliance. But here's the kicker. The emperor isn't actually planning to end the war. Nah, he just wants a temporary ceasefire to buy some time. His real plan is to let Iugo think they're all cool and then stab them in the back with a surprise attack. That's why Artine got shipped off like some unwanted piece of trash. Like, seriously, her old man wants her dead and wants to pin it on Iugo. He's just looking for an excuse to start a war with the very nation they just made a marriage alliance with. But Artine ain't about to back down. She ain't just gonna sit around and let them do her dirty. She's got her own plans for the future. And in order to make them happen, she needs Tarkin to be on her side. They decided to set up camp and take a break. When Artine sees this fancy tea set and dessert in front of her, she just knows something fishy is going on. She looks at herself, covered in dirt with a messed up dress, and the ladies-in-waiting start making fun of her. Artine can't help but wonder what kind of shady business they're up to this time. You see, instead of using a portal to get to Iugo, they opted for a fancy carriage. And Artine had a feeling that trouble was brewing. And boy, was she right? They made her suffer in that stuffy, hot carriage for a whole 10 days. Every time she tried to change her uncomfortable dress, those knights would come knocking on the carriage window, not giving a damn about her comfort. But now, out of the blue, they're telling Artine to come out and enjoy some fancy tea. And they actually think she won't be suspicious? It's pretty hilarious if you ask me. Artine figures it ain't the right time to reveal her true self, so she decides to play along for now. She holds her teacup and starts peering into the tea, and she gets a shock when she glimpses something in the tea. It's the lady-in-waiting deliberately tossing hot water at Artine's face, causing damage and all that jazz. But you know what's messed up? The lady-in-waiting acts all innocent, like it was just a flippin' accident. Truth is, they all planned this messed-up attack on Artine. That thing Artine saw in the tea, it's called Monarch's Sight. It's this super special ability that her father is so obsessed with, and he believes Artine failed to acquire it. When she looks at any kind of reflective surface, she can see the past, present, and even the future. So now that she knows what's about to go down, Artine's wondering what she should do. The location and the outfits in the vision she saw in the tea line up perfectly. It means something seriously messed up is about to go down, like any second now. Then comes the lady-in-waiting, strolling over with that boiling hot water, planning to chuck it at Artine since she's sitting there all vulnerable. But out of nowhere, Artine jumps up and totally catches the lady-in-waiting off guard. She's got some tricks up her sleeve. The hot water spills all over the place, and Lady Brody, that lady-in-waiting, starts screaming in pain. She's frantically touching her burnt face, while the other lady-in-waiting is freaking out and asking for help. Artine just stands there, observing the chaos. Then this lady-in-waiting wearing a red dress marches up to Artine and starts getting all loud, demanding to know what Artine's gonna do about it. But Artine stays cool and calmly asks why the lady-in-waiting is putting the blame on her. She explains that all she did was stand up, and it was Lady Brody who ended up spilling the hot water on herself. Artine then hits the lady-in-waiting with a question. She asks if she's supposed to be Lady Brody's babysitter or something. That totally shocks the lady-in-waiting. She never expected Artine to speak so eloquently. She probably thought Artine was a total idiot. But hey, Artine's got this smirk of satisfaction on her face, showing that she's not just gonna sit back and take it when something bad happens to her. While Lady Brody is still freaking out about her messed up face, other people are trying to convince her that once they reach Iugo, her face will be treated properly. But it's gonna take another 2 weeks to get there, and she's feeling desperate. Observing the situation, Artine assumes that those people, they're the type who can't even imagine themselves getting hurt when they bully others. They only realize it once they get hurt themselves. Dumb jerks. At first, Artine planned on being obedient until they reached Iugo, but everything changed after what she saw with that Monarch's Sight. She wants to protect her future, so she's gotta fight back. And as Artine elegantly sips her tea, that lady-in-waiting realizes she's the one who got played. She probably thought it would be easy to bully Artine, especially since the Emperor himself ordered the lady-in-waiting to do it. But oh boy, she was so wrong. Days pass by. The lady-in-waiting, while stomping on Artine's only spare clothes, smugly informs her that unfortunately, it's the only outfit she has to change into. But you know what? Artine doesn't say a word. She quickly picks up her dirty clothes from the ground and darts into the carriage, leaving the lady-in-waiting in complete shock. Ever since that hot water incident, those jerks haven't been bullying Artine as much. And even if they give her clothes that they've trampled all over with their shoes, it doesn't really get to her. But now she realizes something messed up. They only prepared one extra set of clothes. They must have planned to put Artine in such a terrible state. Finally, the day arrives when they reach Iugo. The knights of Iugo, who catch sight of Artine's carriage, start talking smack about the Sylvanians. They call them sneaky and cunning, and one of them even smirks and suggests that the princess might faint when she sees them. But then this Iugo dude with short red hair steps in and tells them to shut their traps and greet the Sylvanians. He ain't having none of that disrespect. As the Sylvanians roll up, the knights of Iugo are checking out the fancy carriage and those overdressed ladies. They're curious about what kind of princess Artine is gonna be. When the carriage door swings open, out steps Artine, all dirty and stuff. The Sylvanian knight introduces her to the Iugo folks, who are totally taken aback by Artine's appearance. They're like, "Oh, what the heck happened to her?" That red-haired knight from Iugo ain't too pleased. He thinks the Sylvanus Emperor is disrespecting Iugo by sending them a princess who looks like she crawled out of the gutter. See, the Emperor's trying to show off Sylvanus's power with the fancy carriage and all, but sending a filthy princess to Iugo? That's a real slap in the face to Iugo. The Iugo knights are getting pretty mad now. They can't believe the Sylvanas emperor would dare look down on their lord like that. Artine saw this coming though. She knew it was gonna happen. Suddenly, she gets this determined look on her face, walks straight up to the Iugo knights, and locks eyes with the red-haired knight. She's probably wondering if he's the one who's gonna be her husband. Artine got word that Tarkin would be waiting for her at the royal gate in the capital. She looks at the guy standing in front of her and figures he must be some high-ranking Iugo dude. She's relieved that he's not bad-looking, so at least she won't have to live with an eyesore. The red-haired knight bows and greets her, and Artine even likes the sound of his voice. Most importantly, she's happy that he's treating her with respect, even though she looks nothing like a princess right now. But then she notices something fishy. When the red-haired knight introduces himself as Durante, the guy who will be escorting her, Artine realizes he's Tarkin's underling. That catches her off guard, so she asks where her future husband is. And Durante tells her that Tarkin is out hunting. Artine's face falls, but then she quips that her future hubby must be pretty shy. That throws the Iugo knights for a loop, and they try not to burst out laughing. Durante explains that it's not exactly like that, but there were some crazy demonic beasts roaming around. Without a hint of fear, Artine asks why Durante didn't just say that in the first place. Durante just shrugs and says he was answering her question. But Artine ain't buying it. She tells him that lying isn't the only way to deceive someone, and it's sneaky to give a half-truth like it's the whole truth. Durante's totally caught off guard by what Artine is saying. She's one bold chick, I tell ya. She can see through Durante's eyes, and she declares that it's not a good idea to try and fool her anymore. Even with her dirty face, Durante can see the sparkle in Artine's eyes, like stars in the night sky, and it feels like she's looking straight into his soul. As Durante suggests that Artine freshen up and change her clothes, the lady-in-waiting and the Sylvanas knight don't seem too pleased. They assume that the Iugo people are calling their princess dirty. Durante has to step back and avoid causing any conflict while his lord is away. Even though the Iugo knights hold back their anger, they still show respect towards Artine, which surprises her. As they march towards the palace, Durante is shocked to see carriages belonging to other princes and princesses already parked in front. He wonders if they're spying on Tarkin's future bride, even though Tarkin himself hasn't even met her yet due to the demonic beasts. It's like the other royals have way too much free time on their hands. And when the Sylvanas carriage arrives, people start murmuring about how grand it is. Artine steps out of the carriage and looks around. She can feel eyes scanning her from head to toe, piercing through her like arrows and spears. One person even has the audacity to openly say that she's a perfect match for someone of lowly blood. Looks like they despise Tarkin too. They mock Artine further, saying she looks worse than a beggar. The fact that they're greeting a bride from a distant nation with such suffocating hostility is unbearable. Meanwhile, Artine's ladies-in-waiting wear delighted expressions as they witness how the people of Iugo treat Artine. Durante, watching from the side, wonders why Artine's own people, who should protect and support her, seem to be doing the opposite. Suddenly, a tall, imposing man appears from behind the Sylvanas knight, who brought the gift for Iugo. This man takes one of the silks from the knight, causing the knight to instantly get angry and try to stop him. The knight starts babbling about how precious and expensive the silk is, but then abruptly stops. Artine, who is suddenly wrapped in a luxurious silk, feels surprised and even more confused by the actions of this man. He picks her up and carries her, stating that there's no problem with taking the silk since he should give his bride the most precious items. The knights of Iugo bow to him as he walks past them. Artine, initially bewildered, now realizes that the man carrying her is none other than Tarkin himself, her future husband, as she looks into his sparkling eyes. With his long black hair and impressive physique, Tarkin gazes at his future bride while carrying her tenderly. Artine can't help but wonder if everyone from Iugo is that tall. Even though he hasn't done anything extraordinary, he has the power to silence the proud people of Sylvanas in an instant. Tarkin glares at the other Iugo prince and princess who had been mocking him, leaving them speechless. He takes Artine inside the palace, leaving those disrespectful individuals behind. Setting Artine down, Tarkin makes it clear that she shouldn't misunderstand his actions, as he simply can't stand the way her siblings talk. Locking his gaze with Artine, he emphasizes that he doesn't like her or anything. Observing his current state, covered in dirt and demon's blood, Artine wonders if it would be even more dangerous if he did like her. After all, she's sweaty and filthy right now, so she brushes off the thought. Suddenly, Tarkin instructs the maid to bathe Artine, surprising her with his decision. Artine comments that they're not even married yet, to which they both find themselves taken aback. They exchange a lingering look, leaving Artine to ponder what Tarkin truly thinks of her. While she thinks they should decide who gets to wash up first. With a mischievous grin, Tarkin assures her that he won't devour her after taking a bath, so there's no need to worry. However, Artine is perplexed by Tarkin's choice of words, which could be interpreted as something inappropriate if taken literally. She assumes Tarkin is a pervert, leaving him surprised by her assumption. They start arguing about it. Tarkin insists that all he meant was he wouldn't do that in response to what Artine said about them not being married yet. But Artine isn't even fazed. She clarifies that she meant they can't bathe together because they're not married. This only confuses Tarkin even more as he tries to understand what she's saying. However, Tarkin eventually grasps Artine's point. Since he's also dirty, he realizes he should also wash up himself. Understanding what Artine meant, Tarkin tells her that he will wash up somewhere else. Without wasting any time, Artine quickly jumps off the couch and asks the maid to show her the way. Tarkin, watching her from behind, can't help but think about how peculiar Artine is. Initially, he assumed she would be in tears being in that humiliating situation, given her noble background in Sylvanas and upbringing in the Imperial Palace. But to his surprise, Artine's face showed complete indifference. Tarkin finds himself wondering why she's alone and covered in dirt, never before being so conscious of a woman who is meant to become his wife. Meanwhile, Artine is pleasantly surprised by the luxurious bath with hot water in the bathtub. Several maids approach her, showing respect and offering their services. It's probably the first time Artine has had a proper bath since she was little, and she is treated with kindness and professionalism by the maid. This treatment is a stark contrast to the ladies who have always ignored her, and it leaves her amazed and wondering if it reflects Tarkin's capabilities and charm. As the maid cleans her, they can't help but gaze at Artine in awe, prompting her to ask if something is wrong. It turns out the maids are simply mesmerized by Artine's natural beauty, with her stunning purple eyes and shiny silver hair. Realizing that she has caught their attention, the maids quickly apologize. As the maids leave, Artine eagerly gets into the bathtub, feeling the hot water wash away her exhaustion and stress. It's so comforting, it's like all her troubles are melting away. As she starts to relax, the water in the tub begins to ripple, signaling that her magical ability to see visions is activating. Artine looks at the water's reflection and is surprised to see Tarkin there, but she can't quite figure out if it's a vision of the present, past, or future. However, when she notices Tarkin's dirty appearance, she secretly hopes it's a glimpse of the past because she's not a fan of guys who are all dirty and messy. In the reflection, Artine sees someone calling out to Tarkin from behind. Tarkin mentions the name DNA, and she's asking him what he's been thinking about that he didn't notice her approaching. Tarkin avoids the question, trying to brush it off by saying he wasn't thinking about anything important. With a curious look on her face and while placing her hand on Tarkin's, DNA boldly asks if he has feelings for the princess. When Artine sees this through her magical sight, she's taken aback, realizing that they're talking about her. Tarkin shuts down DNA's question, saying there's no way he likes Artine, and he's sure DNA knows it too. He puts on a serious face and declares that his feelings won't ever change. After getting a glimpse of the situation from the monarch's sight, Artine realizes that love isn't a part of an arranged marriage. Observing their closeness, Artine assumes DNA is Tarkin's romantic partner. She sees it as an advantage when negotiating with him. Seizing this opportunity, Artine asks the maid to escort her to Tarkin instead of resting in her chamber. In Tarkin's room, DNA is busy preparing tea. She's relieved to learn that Tarkin has zero interest in Artine. DNA thinks to herself that Tarkin remains his usual self. Someone difficult to approach yet exuding both elegance and danger. Out of the blue, the maid informs Tarkin that Artine is on her way to their room, leaving both DNA and Tarkin bewildered. Tarkin grants permission for Artine to enter. As the door swings open, DNA and Tarkin can't conceal their expressions of disbelief as they lay eyes on Artine, looking naturally beautiful without a speck of dirt. While they wonder how she managed to surprise them like that, Artine takes a seat and subtly signals DNA for a cup of tea. DNA, still stunned by Artine's beauty, apologizes and worries that Artine might think she's being disrespectful. She then introduces herself and greets Artine. It's clear that DNA is taken aback by Artine's prettiness and is concerned that Tarkin might develop feelings for her. Then Tarkin tells DNA to leave the room. Sitting face to face, Tarkin asks Artine coldly what she wants, and Artine responds with the same question. Tarkin locks eyes with her, sensing that there's something she wants to discuss. Artine calmly replies that since they're going to get married, there's no need for any reason to share a cup of tea. But Tarkin remains displeased. Taking a sip of her tea, Artine is pleasantly surprised by its exquisite taste, as it's the first time she's had such high-quality tea. Setting her tea down on the table, Artine reveals her true intention for seeking out Tarkin. She proposes a business partnership. This shocks Tarkin. What Artine truly desires is to amass a great fortune so that she can secure her freedom and not be locked away by anyone anymore. She's determined to witness all the visions she received through the monarch's sight with her own eyes, and that's why she needs a substantial amount of money and Tarkin's cooperation. Tarkin expresses his confusion, and Artine swiftly clarifies that she's not a business addict, nor is she asking to borrow money or requesting Tarkin to invest in anything. Due to their political ties through the arranged marriage, Artine explains that it would be beneficial for both of them to establish a win-win situation, akin to a business relationship. Tarkin observes Artine's audacity in speaking to him so boldly, yet he agrees with her points. However, Tarkin raises the question of what Artine can offer him if he decides to help her. Suddenly, Artine drops Tarkin's name and asks if there's something he desires from her. She believes she holds a trump card, but Tarkin turns his face away, concealing his expression from Artine. Still avoiding eye contact, Tarkin questions what she can accomplish with her slim figure, and even doubts her ability to hold a fork with those tiny hands. Undeterred, Artine claims that her hands are of normal size for Sylvanians. She assumes that Tarkin is underestimating her. Abruptly, she stands up and declares that she will prove to him what she's capable of. Artine then challenges Tarkin to witness it for himself before sealing the deal. Meanwhile, the folks in Iugo are buzzing with gossip about Artine, who is supposedly locked up due to a mental illness. They fret about the possibility of Tarkin becoming the crown prince one day, and Artine becoming the crown princess, fearing it would tarnish Iugo's reputation. Their chatter abruptly halts as Tarkin strolls past, exuding an incredibly cool vibe. They find themselves gazing at his strikingly handsome face. While they're marveling at Tarkin's shiny hair, they spot a silver-haired figure by his side. It's Artine, looking completely different from the rumors they've heard. They're taken aback and can't help but wonder what Artine and Tarkin are up to as they make their way to the king's palace. Inside the king's palace, the king of Iugo, King Nevtar, receives word that Artine is on her way to the palace. He wonders why she wants to meet him now when the official audience with the Sylvanas delegation is scheduled for tomorrow. The second princess, Yenneca, manages to convince her father to see Artine, as she is also curious about her. However, King Nevtar already knows that Yenneca and the other princes and princesses have gone out to meet the bride. Still, he finds it amusing. In the end, King Nevtar grants permission for Artine and Tarkin to enter, as there's no reason to deny them a meeting. With a wicked grin on her face, Yenneca plans to mock the disheveled Artine in front of her father. But hey, no chance, baby! As they step into the room, Artine gracefully greets the king with perfect poise, leaving Yenica utterly shocked. Even the king himself is impressed by her impeccable manners and silently praises her in his mind. It's a complete surprise for him, especially considering Artine's past imprisonment. King Nephter expresses his gratitude to Artine for making the long journey to Iugo. He then instructs the servant to bring refreshments. While Artine lets out a relieved sigh, glad that she didn't make any mistakes. Since she only learned it from the monarch's sight, she had worried that her body wouldn't move properly. But judging by the king's positive response, Artine has handled herself exceptionally well, especially for her first time in such a situation. Artine's eyes lock onto the dessert the servant places on the table. She recognizes it from the monarch's sight, a light yellow jelly dessert famous as Iugo's specialty, with a delightful combination of sweetness and sourness. Artine can't resist the temptation to try it, but she composes herself, realizing it's not the appropriate moment. She gestures, indicating her determination to prove Tarkin wrong and dispel any doubts he has. Witnessing this, Tarkin suddenly feels uneasy. From the king's point of view, it appears as though they are getting along well. King Nephter asks Artine the reason behind her visit, but just as she is about to explain her intentions, out of the blue, the other prince and princesses enter the room. The third prince, Martin, stating that they came to see the king and now have the chance to meet Artine. He starts chattering about Artine, expressing their curiosity about the rumors of her beauty. Tarkin appears annoyed but manages to remain calm. However, as they lay eyes on Artine's stunning appearance, they are all taken aback in disbelief. Tarkin realizes their initial intention was to insult his future wife, unaware that Artine's disheveled appearance wasn't her usual look. Sensing an unexpected turn of events, Artine calmly asks, "Who?" The fourth princess, Stalin, seems unsure how to respond to Artine, while the first princess, Palamian, whispers to her, telling her not to let any irritation show. Palamian didn't expect Artine to look so different, and she's wondering why the queen didn't clue them in on this important detail. Feeling pretty confident, Palamian introduces herself and vents her frustration, saying she'll let it slide this time but warns Artine to watch her step in the future. She's like, "What did you mean by who anyway? It's not like we're your servants or anything." Both princesses are all smug, thinking they handled the situation perfectly. Stalin jumps in and adds her 2 cents, pointing out how Artine is supposed to be a princess, but doesn't even know the basics of manners. Palamian just shrugs it off, saying they were expecting way too much from Artine. Meanwhile, Tarkin watches all this go down, seeing how the princesses did a complete 180 in their attitude after excessively praising their opponent. It's all part of the typical royal family act, but Tarkin would rather duke it out with a sword. He can't stand the fake words and hidden agendas that the nobles always have. Tarkin realizes that, because of him, Artine is enduring all sorts of humiliation in Iugo, which she shouldn't have to face. Artine finally responds to the princesses, saying there's been a misunderstanding, but Palamian brushes it off, thinking Artine is just making excuses. All of a sudden, she's caught off guard by Artine's serious expression. As Artine declares that she wasn't asking who they were, but rather asking herself who because she's pretty sure she's seen them somewhere before. Palamian is even more shocked, unable to believe that Artine is claiming to remember her. With a slight smirk on her face, Artine turns to Martin, the third prince, and asks if they've met before. Martin responds, saying they might have since he's been to Sylvanas before. But then Artine confidently states that she believes they've crossed paths somewhere other than Sylvanas. Palamian's mind is blown, realizing that Artine's question wasn't just a wild guess. Artine actually remembers them being present when she arrived at the Iugo palace. Palamian had underestimated Artine, thinking she was a fool, but turns out she's pretty sharp. Maybe even a little bit scary. Tarkin just stays still, watches Artine from the side. Artine's whole life has been about observing the world through reflections in water, recalling it, and creating vivid imaginations. It's no wonder she's honed her observation skills and memory. Even King Nephter seems impressed with how Artine handled the situation. Palamine, who notices her father's interest in Artine, starts to worry that if Artine spills the beans about what happened at Tarkin's palace to King Nephter, it won't just make them look foolish for pretending not to know, but it could also be dangerous. She's thinking of coming up with a new plan. But out of nowhere, Stalin tries to ruin Palamine's plan by accusing Artine of flirting with another man while she's engaged. When Stalin starts getting fired up to attack Artine, Palamine is caught off guard. Artine remembers the moment she first arrived in the palace, where Stalin had called her common blood. With a confident look, Stalin tries to intimidate Artine. But Artine, seeing through Stalin's immaturity despite her grown-up appearance, smiles. This irks Stalin even more, as she accuses Artine of making a joke out of her words. Knowing she has to step in, Palamine shouts out Stalin's name, surprising her. Then Palamine tries to explain that Stalin is still young and asks Artine for understanding. Artine remains calm, sipping her tea and thinking that Palamine seems to catch on quickly. In Iugo, they haven't appointed a crown prince yet. There's an ongoing power struggle between Hamir, the first prince, and Tarkin, the second prince. Hamir has the advantage of being the queen's biological son, while Tarkin faces political challenges due to his mother being a commoner. But the real battle is between the old guard and the rising powers. Artine decides to take action and confronts Stalin about her doubts regarding Artine's lineage, especially since Stalin previously mentioned Artine's common blood. Stalin and Palamine are taken aback by Artine's bold move. Artine doesn't stop there and points out that Stalin comes from direct royal Iugoan descent. It seems that Artine has no choice but to accept that Stalin represents Iugo's official stance on the legitimacy of the Sylvanian royal family. Alright, let's change the focus for a moment. Over at the Queen's palace, the maid rushes in to inform the Queen that the prince and princesses have headed to the main palace. She asks if it's alright, and the Queen, with a mischievous smile, replies that since it's an informal meeting, there's no need to be overly fussy about it. She's confident that her beloved Yenica, who's among them, will be treated kindly by everyone. Let's jump right back into the intense situation at the main palace. Panicking, Palamine scrambles to explain that Stalin's words don't reflect Iugo's stance at all. She desperately clarifies that Stalin is still young and didn't think through her comments. Martin jumps in to support his sister's explanation, saying that Stalin often blurts out things without considering the consequences. Confused and anxious about her siblings' sudden change in attitude, Stalin looks lost. From his seat, Tarkin observes the scene, realizing that Artine's words hit the mark. If Sylvanas were to find out about this conversation, they would seize the opportunity to gain an advantage. While Iugo currently holds the upper hand in the peace agreement, it's still hanging by a thread. The agreement covers crucial aspects like trade rights, passage rights, and mana stone rights. Even if it's just the careless remarks of an immature princess, Sylvanas would exploit this incident as an excuse to gain more benefits. The Queen's faction would face the consequences. That's why Martin and Palamine are desperately trying to resolve the situation. However, the problem is that they don't know which side their imperial father will lean towards. Getting worried about the situation escalating further, Palamine hurriedly explains that Stalin's words don't reflect Iugo's stance because she didn't think ahead. Martin quickly backs up Palamine's explanation, but as he starts to ask Artine to understand the situation, he stops in his tracks when Artine locks eyes with him. Artine wonders if the situation has already calmed down. In truth, she doesn't plan on pushing it further, neither for what happened when she first arrived, nor for the disrespectful behavior she just experienced. She hopes they'll quiet down now. However, Artine suddenly notices that King Nephter is watching her, and she wonders how long he's been observing her. Thinking that she must have captured the king's attention, she takes it as a sign that she handled the situation well. With a smile, she reassures the king that she won't overstep any boundaries. But Palamine is taken aback by the sight, as she starts envisioning scenarios in her mind where Artine spills everything that happened when she first arrived, playing the innocent card in front of the king. Palamine worries about her own reputation suffering as a result. However, she quickly composes herself, brushing away her own thoughts, while Artine observes her in confusion. Realizing her mistake and understanding what needs to be done, Palamian takes charge and instructs Stalin to apologize to Artine, catching Stalin off guard. Palamian realizes that she underestimated Artine and urges Stalin to offer her apology. Reluctantly, Stalin tries to suppress her displeasure and offers a half-hearted apology to Artine. Calmly, Artine asks if Stalin has anything else to say, reminding her of the vulgar remark she made earlier. Stalin is even more shocked by this mention, but before she can respond, Palamian intervenes and insists that Stalin make a proper apology by acknowledging her mistake sincerely. Although Stalin believes it was just a slip of the tongue and thinks she doesn't need to apologize, she finds herself unable to do anything but follow Palamian's instructions as Palamian now stares directly into her eyes with a stern expression. Finally, Stalin musters up the courage to give a proper apology to Artine. Tarkin, who's been quietly observing everything, is surprised to witness the once arrogant and stubborn foreign princess actually apologizing and even kneeling down. He glances at Artine, expecting to see a triumphant expression on her face for getting the payback she deserved. But to his astonishment, Artine looks somehow happy, completely unfazed by the situation. It's not the dramatic reaction he anticipated. He can't help but smile, realizing that Artine has successfully made an Erugian princess kneel with just a few words. Meanwhile, Artine wonders if Tarkin appreciates the outcome. And sure enough, he does. She knows he harbors resentment towards his half-siblings, and this seems like a satisfying conclusion for him. Deciding to put an end to it all, Artine stands up and approaches Stalin, who's still kneeling. She admits she didn't expect this turn of events, extending her hand to help Stalin up. Artine explains that her previous question was simply meant to give Stalin a chance to speak her mind, and she doesn't feel comfortable seeing the princess in such a submissive position. In that moment, Stalin realizes that Artine never scolded her or demanded an apology. It dawns on her that this situation seems completely insignificant to Artine. Stalin witnesses Artine's generosity and open-mindedness, but there's also a coldness in her eyes that resembles their imperial father. The king, once again, is impressed by Artine's ability to understand her political position and make the most of it. Yenneca, noticing her father's interest in Artine, starts to worry. Finally, the king speaks up, asking them to take a seat and explain the reason for their unexpected visit during tea time. Martin, Palamian, and Stalin are at a loss for words, unable to explain their true intentions. Sensing the tension, Yenneca decides to intervene, expressing her disappointment in her siblings for causing a scene. She puts on her innocent look and shares her sadness that they gave a bad first impression to Artine, worrying that Artine might think they hate her. Artine, still observing Yenneca, the queen's biological daughter and Hamir's younger sister, watches as Yenneca approaches her and tries to be overly friendly by suggesting that she should call Artine Sister Rhine. Thinking back to when Artine was a kid, she had this lovely little sister who used to call her Sister Rin. When Yenneca asks Artine to call her sister Rin too, she gladly agrees. And that totally makes Yenneca's day. Artine goes ahead and says it feels like she's actually seeing her own precious younger sister, which makes Yenneca even happier. But hey, we all know it's just an act, right? Sitting between Tarkin and Artine, Yenneca plots to win Artine over, thinking it'll be a breeze to replace Tarkin. To make it seem natural, Yenneca decides to get closer to Artine by offering her help if she feels uncomfortable in the palace. Artine responds with a smile and thanks Yenneca, talking to her in a casual manner, which makes Yenneca feel a bit awkward. But before Yenneca can say anything, Artine realizes her mistake and asks if she can speak informally. Yenneca doesn't really want that, but she hesitates to express it. Artine assumes Yenneca as her new little sibling because of the whole Sister Rin thing. She admits she misunderstood Yenneca's intentions and apologizes. Yenneca is caught off guard by Artine's statement and quickly changes her expression, pretending she meant it even though she really doesn't like the idea. As for Yenneca, the only one who can treat her as a younger sibling is her brother Hamir. Artine sees this as a positive sign and asks for confirmation. Yenneca, still faking her expression, reluctantly tells Artine she can call her Yenneca. But before she can say more words casually, Artine interrupts, saying her little sister has always spoken formally, even since they were kids. Martin nearly bursts into laughter, and Yenica's patience is almost pushed to the limit. She turns to Martin and demands to know what's so funny. Meanwhile, Artine gives the king and the Prince Frank jelly a thorough inspection. Yenica wonders what Artine is staring at and assumes it's the king's Prince Frank jelly. She thinks Artine has never seen that jelly before and doesn't know that the king always saves it for Yenica. Out of the blue, Yenica cheerfully asks the king to hand her the jelly. However, before the king can comply, he's taken aback when Artine swoops in and picks up the jelly, holding it right in front of his mouth. Everyone is completely stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Without missing a beat, Artine tells the king to open wide and makes a feeding gesture. The king hesitantly asks if Artine intends to feed him, and she confidently confirms it. Yenica can't contain her emotions any longer and vents her displeasure at seeing Artine feed her father. But Tarkin steps in to support Artine, mentioning that even though he and Artine haven't had the ceremony yet, they will soon be one big family. So, there shouldn't be any issue with treating each other as family beforehand, which seems contradictory coming from Yenica, who claimed they were already family. Upon hearing Tarkin's explanation, Yenica fails to provide any valid reason behind her discontent. Artine assures the king that she'll be more cautious if he feels uneasy about it. Initially hesitant, the king eventually takes a bite of the jelly from Artine. This surprises even the servants, as they never expected the tough and strict king to have such a soft side. After savoring the jelly, the king explains that he doesn't mind at all. Yenica, witnessing the entire scene, clenches her fists, trembling with anger, and wonders if Artine knows the king's secret. The other princes and princesses are left stunned as they witness Artine continuing to feed the king. Even though the king has already had 3 servings, Artine shows no signs of stopping. She asks the king if he enjoys the taste of the jelly. While the king responds positively, Tarkin shoots him a shocked glance, gesturing as if asking his father if he has lost his mind. Tarkin wonders where the king's prestige and dignity have gone. It's quite a challenge to pick up the Prince Frank jelly, and Artine didn't expect that her past practice would come in handy now. In the past, Artine watched her younger sister feed their father the Prince Frank jelly from the monarch's sight. Inspired by that, she practiced picking up little balls of mud with a fork, hoping to receive her father's compliments as well. However, she eventually realized that her father only desired her power, the monarch's sight, not a genuine connection with her. That realization shattered any hope she had of having a meaningful relationship with him. But out of nowhere, Artine halts when she hears the sound of a cup hitting the table. It turns out to be Yenica's teacup that fell, causing the tea to spill. Yenica immediately blames it on the teacup being unbalanced and starts raising her voice, accusing the servants of not checking it properly and demanding that they get rid of it right away. Palamine notices this unexpected change in Yenica's behavior and wonders what could have caused her to act out of character, as Yenica is usually so conscious of maintaining her image. There's a secret that nobody in the palace, not even Tarkin, knows about. Yenica, who always asks for the king's jelly, isn't just doing it because she wants to eat more of it. She's actually keeping the king's secret hidden. The secret is that the king has injured his wrist. During times of war, news about the king's injuries can easily be silenced, especially if they're not life-threatening. It's because an injury like that would only increase anxiety among the citizens and lower the morale of the soldiers. So, the king has been hiding it, pretending to be completely fine. He avoids eating foods like Prince Frank jellies because he doesn't want to give any hint that he struggles to pick things up. Ironically, these jellies are often served as desserts during traditional Erugian dinners. The only ones who know the truth are the king's doctor and Yenica. Yenica covers it up by asking for the king's share of the jelly. People who witness this assume that Yenica is the king's favorite among all his children, regardless of how much the king dotes on Tarkin. Some even speculate that it secures her brother Hamir's position as the crown prince. But if Yenica truly wanted to keep the king's secret, she could have just fed him herself. From Tarkin's perspective, what Artine did might seem absurd since he still doesn't know about the king's injury. Artine was simply trying to help the king. Now, She's worried that the king might get angry with her for treating him like a child. As Artine anxiously observes the king's calm expression, she becomes even more nervous as it's her first time in such a situation. However, to her surprise, the king smiles. He even mentions how happy he is with his decision to marry her to Tarkin. The king expresses his satisfaction and asks Artine if there's something she'd like as a reward. He affectionately calls her by her nickname, Rin. Artine is taken aback by this unexpected gesture. Not only has she been granted permission to call the king father, but now he's also using her nickname, which is something she had always hoped for. Seeing Artine's surprised expression, the king asks if it's too sudden to call her by her nickname. Artine quickly clarifies that it's not the case, and she's just overjoyed to hear it. For Artine, it feels like she finally has a real father. She smiles brightly, feeling grateful that her actions have brought her to this state. Making sure she has the king's permission to ask for anything, Artine confidently states that there is something she wants. The king, curious, asks what it is she desires, suggesting possibilities like gemstones, gold, or land. Artine glances at Tarkin, then back at the king, and with determination, she firmly expresses her wish for the eradication of the stigma that labels Iugo as a barbaric nation. In fact, that's the main reason for her visit to the king, which had been delayed due to some previous events. This unexpected request from Artine catches everyone, including the king and Tarkin, off guard. It's her chance to showcase her abilities to Tarkin, proving that she's a valuable asset worth sealing the deal for, even before knowing all the terms and conditions. As they stroll out of the tea room, Tarkin keeps an eye on Artine from behind, totally blown away by her unexpected request. Ever since then, Artine hasn't uttered a word, leaving Tarkin clueless about what's going on in her mind. Out of the blue, Tarkin asks Artine if she could spare a moment for him. She swiftly replies, saying she's swamped with stuff. Nevertheless, Tarkin persists, assuring her it'll only be a quick thing. After some back and forth, Artine finally gives in. The table is all set with tea and stuff, and Tarkin kicks off the conversation, acknowledging Artine's ability to assist him. He mentions how amusing it was to witness his siblings acting like complete clowns and making fools of themselves. Although deep down, Artine feels a thrill hearing the compliment from Tarkin, she maintains a poker face. Tarkin then shares his initial impression of Artine when she first arrived in Iugo, thinking she was in tears and humiliated. He cautiously points out that he believes, as a Sylvanian princess, Artine isn't accustomed to that kind of mockery. While munching on a scone, Artine seems unfazed, as if it didn't bother her in the least. Tarkin expresses his disbelief, asking if that means Artine is used to such treatment. Taken aback by Tarkin's reaction, Artine confirms if he genuinely didn't know that she had been imprisoned. Judging by Tarkin's expression, it's clear he had no idea. Artine assumes that Tarkin must have zero interest in his future wife. Out of the blue, Artine questions whether there's a possibility that Tarkin desires a war between Iugo and Sylvanas. This unexpected query catches Tarkin off guard. Artine believes that Tarkin's answer will determine her future, as while they sit there conversing, Sylvanas is preparing for war, going so far as to conceal a lethal poison within the dowry intended for assassinating Tarkin. Alright, let's change the subject for a moment. In the meantime, the ladies-in-waiting are escorted by an Iugo maid to the palace, and one of them is completely blown away by how magnificent the palace is. Lady Brody, who has a noticeable burn scar on her face, asks the maid if they have a skilled healer around, but unfortunately, all she gets is the same old story: her scar is too old to be completely removed. Suddenly, one of the ladies-in-waiting mentions that the guy who's rumored to be a beast is nothing like what she imagined. The other one agrees, saying he's quite the handsome fella, which doesn't really match up with that princess who looks like a beggar. Yep, they're talking about Tarkin. Lady Brody predicts that Tarkin will soon lose interest in Artine, looking down on her, who has been locked up all alone for 10 long years. These ladies-in-waiting start creating their own little scenarios in their heads, taking it upon themselves to take very good care of the princess's husband as well. But suddenly, a knight from Sylvanas rushes in and shatters their foolish dreams. He informs them that Artine has just returned from a meeting with the Iugo king, leaving them completely shocked to the core. Lady Rosaline, thinking that Artine still doesn't know her place, becomes furious. Now, let's get back to Tarkin and Artine. Tarkin clarifies that while there are certainly people who desire war, he is not one of them. So he's confused by Artine's question. Artine then reveals that the easiest way to ignite a war is by killing her, although it's not the only way. She mentions other possibilities like being a spy or attempting to assassinate Tarkin when he least expects it. Artine declares that she wouldn't engage in such dangerous actions, especially since she has no fondness for Sylvanas and is despised by the Sylvanas Emperor. As Artine explains, Tarkin can't believe that she didn't have the Emperor's favor to the extent that she was imprisoned. He concludes that there's a high chance Artine was sent here to meet her demise. Suddenly, Artine calls Tarkin's name and expresses her desire not to die. She emphasizes that Tarkin also doesn't want a war to erupt, which means their interests align. Artine further states that she can handle matters on his behalf while he's away, mentioning the ongoing War of Succession in Iugo. With a bright smile, she reveals that all she wants is for Tarkin to put in the effort to keep her alive. Hearing this, Tarkin can't believe what's on Artine's mind, going through all this trouble just to ask for something as basic as protecting her life. He wonders what kind of mistreatment she endured to make such a request. Tarkin tried his best to ignore her, believing that regardless of his partner, the marriage alliance itself was the most crucial aspect of the peace agreement. That's what he thought until he saw Artine's calm expression, even though she was still covered in dirt. It annoys him greatly, but he can't even find the words to describe why. Suddenly, Artine stands up and extends her hand, encouraging them to work together and calling him her partner. Tarkin reaches out and seals the deal by shaking her hand. On her way back to her chamber, the Sylvanas knight finally spots Artine and raises his voice, calling out to her. He expresses his anger at her for wandering around without permission, and tells her to start behaving properly in Iugo. Blaming her for the actions of the ladies-in-waiting, he plans to scold Artine so she won't dare to act up like that again. But guess what? Our hero arrives just in time. Tarkin suddenly appears, slinging his arm around Artine's shoulder and giving a fierce glare to that arrogant knight. The Sylvanas knight seems taken aback and asks what brings Tarkin there. Tarkin confidently approaches the knight, stating that he must have misunderstood something. Feeling uneasy, the knight insists that it's a private Sylvanian matter, and that Tarkin shouldn't pay any attention. He quickly glances at Artine, silently signaling her to tell Tarkin to leave. But Artine, making a dismissive gesture, clearly indicates that she doesn't care. With his piercing gaze, Tarkin declares that it has everything to do with his future bride. Tarkin's mere presence alone is enough to intimidate the knight, and he straightforwardly tells the knight that there's no point in a dog baring its teeth at its own master. Tarkin effortlessly throws the cheeky knight to the ground, making him roll. Despite having his foot on the knight's face, the knight still manages to blabber about making a formal complaint as a Sylvanas knight. But Tarkin couldn't care less about that. He glances at Artine and states that since the knight is his bride's dog, it's up to the owner to decide his punishment. Artine is stunned by Tarkin's statement. However, the knight, still under Tarkin's foot, continues to show no respect and demands that Artine order Tarkin to remove his foot instantly. He's full of anger towards Artine, who simply stands there without flinching. Artine recalls the moment when they were on their way to Iugo, and that impudent knight harassed her, intentionally peeping into her carriage while she was changing her dress. Artine can't believe that after pulling off such nonsense, the knight is now asking for her help. She walks closer to Tarkin, places her hand on his arm, and smiles at him. Tarkin still has no clue about what she's up to. But then, Artine mentions the saying that couples are like two halves of one heart, and suddenly, she changes her expression. Artine gives the green light for Tarkin to step on the knight. Hearing that, Tarkin flashes a grin and wastes no time. He does exactly what his bride wants without any hesitation. The knight is left beaten and battered. After dealing with that arrogant knight, Tarkin orders his servant to throw him in prison. Meanwhile, Aristine still feels Tarkin's arm lingering on hers and can't help but think that his arm is strong and powerful, easily brushing off the night like dust. She gazes at Tarkin with a hint of jealousy. Catching Aristine's gaze, Tarkin shyly looks away. Thanks to Tarkin, Aristine feels a sense of relief and finds herself thinking that Tarkin may be a pervert, but he's actually a good person. Meanwhile, Tarkin starts feeling uneasy due to the ominous gaze lurking behind him. Entering her chamber, Aristine is amazed by how perfectly it's been set up, even though it's just a temporary room until the wedding. It truly feels like the people of Iugo are welcoming her with open arms. Aristine feels grateful for this arranged marriage, where everyone is so kind to her, and even the king treats her better than her own father ever did. Having Tarkin by her side only adds to her happiness. But right now, all she can think about is having another bite of that delicious scone. However, her daydreaming is interrupted by a loud voice calling her name. Lady Brody seems upset as she had been calling Aristine multiple times without a response. The other ladies in waiting quickly close the door, making sure all the Erugian have left the chamber. Aristine remains silent, wearing a determined expression on her face. As the ladies in waiting start to corner her, Lady Rosaline arrogantly tries to intimidate Aristine, demanding an explanation from her. Previously, Aristine found herself trapped by these three sassy gals who were grilling her for answers. But Aristine keeps her cool and just drops the bomb that they're worth less than a dog. Those words totally catch the ladies in waiting off guard. It's like they got hit by a surprise pie in the face. These ladies, they've got no loyalty or street cred. They're just playing for themselves. They're like those folks who only do what's good for their own agenda. Now let me break it down about these ladies in waiting. Imperial ladies in waiting? They're the fancy pants crew, all from snobby, high-up families. They're not your regular help or court folks. They're more like the VIP companions to the imperial family, helping out and all that jazz. So, it's a big deal. And usually, only well-off high-class ladies get in. But guess what? These ladies are the exception. They're not riding the highborn wave. Nope, they're just giggly thieves, swiping the crumbs sent to the poor abandoned princess crib. And then Rosaline, with that smug grin, tries to play memory lane and remind Aristine about her duty. Red, Sylvanas King shipped Aristine off to Iugo as a potential ghost. But hold up! Aristine is sharper than attack. She lays it out. This ain't Sylvanas' playground, it's Iugo. While the other ladies in waiting are still thinking Aristine's the one in the hot seat, Rosaline's got her Sherlock cap on. Remember those Sylvanian knights who got a whooping from Tarkin? He basically said you don't need a dog that bites the hand that feeds it. Rosaline finally gets it. Aristine's been playing them all along, pulling a fast one with a mask that screams idiot. So, Rosaline steps up, shocking the crowd by suddenly transforming into a four-legged barker right in Aristine's lap. It's like she's realizing she's got to roll with the punches to survive. And even though Aristine didn't see this curveball coming, she's finding it kinda adorable. Meanwhile, over in Iugo's training hall, Tarkin is there, his mind blown wide open. He's thinking about his old man's plan to marry him off to the Sylvanian Imperial Squad, who are supposed to have rich blood running through their veins. The whole point? It's like a cover-up for his political vulnerability because his mom is a commoner. But he's not blind to the fact that the fight for the throne is only getting nastier by the minute. Out of the blue, Durante hollers at him, reminding him about some meeting he's gotta attend. When he walks in, the whole gang's already gathered. Tarkin doesn't waste a breath, kicking off the meeting pronto. They're all hashing out the issue with these freaky demon creatures lurking around. Then someone brings up the scrap with the Sylvanians. And just like that, it's like a mental light bulb goes off, and they remember Tarkin's supposed fiancée. They're all on the edge of their seats, curious about her looks. Durante's been playing secret squirrel with her, but folks are puzzling over why some of Durante's guards appear to have a soft spot for the Sylvanas princess. But before the room turns into a total circus, Tarkin shuts it down. Out of nowhere, he singles out this dude named Jack, demanding to know why he didn't clue him in about Aristine being locked up in the past. And man, Jack can't hold his poker face any longer. He spills that he did everything short of skywriting to report it to Tarkin, but Tarkin was tossing those reports into the fireplace like they were old junk mail. But then, in a wild twist, Tarkin throws everyone for a loop by telling Jack to spill every last detail about Artine from now on. It's like the crowd's wondering if Tarkin caught some kind of love bug for Artine after meeting her face to face. But Tarkin doesn't want to leave them with the wrong idea, so he sets the record straight by saying that Artine holds the key to ending the war with the Empire. He figures it's fine to gather more information. Out of nowhere, Tarkin drops a request for them to fetch a scone-making expert. His crew is all enthusiastic, instantly saying yes to their boss. But then reality dawns on them. A scone specialist? Wait, what? Fast forward to the afternoon when Artine finally wakes up. It's been ages since she's had a proper bath, put on clean clothes, and snuggled into a real bed. Everything just feels so darn cozy, including the plush pillow. Little does she know, Tarkin's been watching her the whole time. Oopsie! Spotting Tarkin there, she's thrown for a loop. Tarkin's sipping his tea like it's no big deal, and casually asks if she's having a blast. Artine, in turn, wonders aloud if he's got nothing better to do, considering he could have woken her up but chose to wait instead. And guess what? Tarkin's caught off guard, having actually tried to rouse her. At first, he loitered outside her room, waiting for someone who's sound asleep. First time he's ever waited for someone to wake up, mind you. But the lady-in-waiting shattered his hopes, letting him know Artine was still in La La Land. So off he went, checked out the training grounds, handled some briefings. You get the drill. When he circled back to her room, he was met with another still-sleeping report from the lady-in-waiting. Enter these ladies-in-waiting with a tea invitation, offering him a sip while they all waited. Suddenly, Tarkin's reminded of when Artine first set foot in Iugo, those same ladies who were poking fun at her, tossing insults her way. With Artine in Snoozeville as lunchtime rolled around and these ladies-in-waiting forming a blockade unnaturally, his mind spiraled down the worst-case scenario path. In a heartbeat, he barged into Artine's room, yanked open the curtains and found her in dreamland. Now he can't even cough up the truth because he's a mix of embarrassed, flustered, and all things in between. Artine, seeing his expression, gets a DJ Vu vibe. She boldly declares that he couldn't wake her up because she was sleeping like an angel. That's like a lightning bolt for Tarkin's brain, shocking him to his core. It's like she's accusing him of being a pervert who gets a kick out of sipping tea while watching people sleep. Tarkin's beyond explaining himself at this point. So, no more waiting. He hands over an envelope, even though he's still feeling irked. Artine's left wondering what's inside as she cracks it open, only to be surprised by the content. So, it is the list of aristocrats who will be attending the delegation's welcome party. Tarkin drops a hint that it'd be cool for Artine to have the heads up before she rolls into the party. But let's be real, it's a ton of info to hand over to someone from the other side of the enemy line, which means Tarkin's giving her some major trust points. Finally, the big day of the welcome bash for the delegation arrives. Tarkin and Artine walk in like $1,000,000, stealing the spotlight together. Artine's beauty has jaws dropping left and right. The whispers start flying. She's nothing like the rumors said. Artine goes on to exchange pleasantries with Iugo's king and queen. The king's all warm and welcoming, but hold up. The queen, that sneaky old lady. She's wearing her caring face mask, and she starts hinting how Artine made the trek to Iugo by carriage instead of hopping through the portal. It's like Artine's alarm bells start ringing, remembering what Tarkin told her about this queen's attempts to off him. First with assassins, and then with a frontline ticket to the Beast Plains. It's pretty clear the queen is ready to throw anything and everything at the wall to make her son, Hamir, the king. So, the queen's welcome could kinda go like this. Dang, Artine couldn't even snag a portal ride? That's a bummer. But you know what? Artine's not falling for that trick. She's got her comeback locked and loaded. She fires back at the queen, explaining how the war has been giving both countries' folks a rough time. And since she's a princess, she just had to see it all up close. Witnessing the struggles of the people made the journey totally worth it for her. The queen's left hanging, unable to come up with a word. But she's gotta force that smile after hearing Aristine's comeback. But out of nowhere, this sneaky dude pipes up. He calls her bluff without batting an eyelash, even pointing out that she's trying to charm the Erugians by rocking their gear. This guy? Duke Sciella, the queen's pops, and Hymir's right-hand man. Technically, as the Sylvanian rep, Aristine's supposed to wear the Sylvanian attire. But seriously, who's gonna come to a party looking like they were wrestled through a mud pit? Duke Sciella ain't holding back, throwing shade at Aristine, treating her like some sort of tribute in front of Tarkin. He's got some serious nerve crossing that line like it's nobody's business. Now, the rest of the crowd starts making fun of Aristine too, even bringing up her time in jail and stuff. Watching all this unfold, Aristine figures these folks must all be on Team Queen and they're all against Tarkin. So Aristine decides to give it her all. She's like, hold up a sec. This is kinda weird. I'm here to stop the war and bring peace between our countries, remember? She goes on to say that mocking her just messes with the whole peace vibe, making it seem like they're all secretly into more war. Duke Sciella is totally taken aback by how clear and straightforward Aristine's words are. He quickly tries to sidestep the situation, claiming he wouldn't dare to challenge it. He's basically realizing that if he pushes further, he might be seen as going against the king's wishes. But Aristine doesn't miss a beat. She brings up the whole attire thing that Duke Sciella mentioned, saying it's supposed to be Erugian. And here's the kicker. This guy has no clue what he's talking about. You can practically hear Aristine's exasperated sigh. She even adds that just like they had high hopes for her, she had high hopes for them all too. But it looks like she gave them too much credit. Duke Sciella can't hide his confusion anymore, and he's like, okay, spill it then, what's up with your clothes? This is when Princess Pelamian jumps in and drops the knowledge bomb about Sylvanian carriole silk. Aristine's got this smirk on her face and she's like, bingo, you got it! She goes on to explain that this silk is a huge deal in Sylvanian culture, so important that they named it after their own country. And getting a top-notch, bright red carriole silk is like hitting the silk jackpot. The Imperial Palace doesn't just toss this stuff around like it's candy. Trust me, jaws are dropping all around. Duke Sciella must be feeling like a complete fool right now. It's like he walked right into a trap. What Aristine is wearing isn't just any outfit. It's a perfectly symbolic attire that uses Sylvanian silk to create an Erugian look, symbolizing unity between the two nations. Oops, Duke, you've been totally played! Just before the official reception kicks off, Aristine finds herself in a tight spot. Her dress is practically ruined, covered in dirt, and she's in desperate need of a solution. She turns to Tarkin for some much-needed assistance. Going for a Sylvanian dress isn't feasible due to time constraints, so thankfully, the Erugian attire becomes the saving grace. Aristine reveals that the silk used in this attire was initially intended as a gift for King Nephter. With her trademark brilliant smile, Aristine takes a courageous step and directly asks the king if she can have the silk as a wedding gift. King Nephter happily agrees, noting how fitting the silk looks on her. His expression shifts quickly, and he adds that it appears Aristine is the lone individual who genuinely prioritizes the future peace of both nations. But right when Aristine and Tarkin are all set to plop down, there's this servant who's practically quaking like a leaf while they stutter out the horrifying truth. There's not a single chair left for them. But wait for it. Just when it seems like things couldn't get worse, the queen swoops in with a solution. She's like, hey, why don't you guys head to the back, like, way back? Yeah, we're talking the kind of seats that are practically on another planet. As Aristine takes a sneaky peek behind her, her eyes lock onto something rather exciting near the dessert table. Now here's where things get juicy. The queen's expression goes from all confident to total shock when she spots Aristine rocking this megawatt smile. It's like the queen was expecting Aristine to be sulking about getting the absolute worst seats. But surprise, Aristine's still beaming like she won the lottery. But hold on, your perfect plan hits a snag. Oh, cunning queen. Observing how Aristine's expression transforms into one of radiance, Tarkin's nerves begin to tingle with unease. It's as if his instincts are sending out a warning signal that turmoil tends to follow whenever Artine wears that kind of expression. Reacting promptly, he firmly clasps Aristine's hand and steps into the spotlight himself. Commenting on the situation, he speculates that perhaps the queen has indulged in a bit too much, considering she openly directed the princess, essentially a living embodiment of peace, to sit at the very back in the lowest position no less. The attendees all exhibit astonishment at Tarkin's sudden foray into the complexities of high society politics. This is the same guy who used to be reserved and quiet. It's a widespread assumption that this bold move is all thanks to Aristine's influence. The queen keeps coming up with excuses, but Tarkin isn't out of tricks just yet. He casually mentions that he just needs a bit of space and turns his head to the other prince and princess, shooting them a glare as if to signal, "Move over." He adds that he's pretty sure someone from the grand imperial family of Iugo can give up a seat for the sake of peace. To prevent any more fuss, the third prince, Martin, immediately gives up his seat for Aristine. But then, Aristine adds her 2 cents, saying that as a couple, she and Tarkin need to sit together. Yep, she didn't come all this way just to let Tarkin get stuck at the back. Then, she goes straight up to Yenneca, the second princess, reminding her of that time when Yenneca mentioned being totally thrilled about Aristine and Tarkin's marriage. This move makes Yenneca stumble over her words even more, and even Aristine's intense glare makes the situation worse. Observing the scene from his throne, King Nevter seems to side with Yenneca, mentioning that her legs are bothering her, so it's best if she remains seated in a comfy chair. Now, here's the catch. Princess Yenneca is the king's absolute favorite daughter. That means Aristine can't just expect the king to take her side in this. But King Nevter doesn't stop there. He brings up what Aristine said earlier about couples sticking together and what Tarkin suggested about making room. The king takes charge and tells a servant to set up seats for Aristine and Tarkin right next to him. This move catches the queen and Duke Sciella off guard, leaving them utterly displeased. Duke Sciella chimes in, noting that the space is reserved for the crown prince and his wife. The queen nods along with the duke, grumbling to the king that there should be some order within the imperial family. However, King Nevter just chuckles in response. He then echoes the queen's words from earlier, saying something like a seat is just a seat. He explains that there's no other choice since it was the queen herself who made a mistake during the seating arrangements. Ouch! It's like a smack right in the queen's face, leaving her completely speechless. In that very moment, it wasn't just the queen's supporters, but also the neutral nobles caught in between who sensed a significant change. The political situation had taken a complete turn, with Tarkin, who had previously been wary of diving into politics, stepping up and the queen getting sidelined. And right at the heart of it all is Aristine. As they settle into their seats, Tarkin suddenly asks Aristine if they're familiar with each other. Naturally, this leaves Aristine puzzled. Tarkin then explains that when the queen suggested she sit in the back, he noticed what Aristine was eyeing. Getting a bit closer to Aristine, Tarkin turns his face and curiously asks about the identity of the man who caught her attention. Aristine hesitates for a beat. All the while, Tarkin keeps his gaze firmly locked onto hers. Then she responds, "It's a business secret." Tarkin, without missing a beat, casually averts his gaze, indicating that he's cool with it and that he's not prying. He emphasizes that he's not really curious, as long as her involvement doesn't lead her into any trouble. So, this is the guy who's piqued Aristine's interest. He's the one she saw in her vision. About a month ago, as Aristine was making her way from Sylvanas to Iugo, the waters cleared around her and she had this sort of vision. That's when she encountered this man who earnestly asked her to accept him. And with all her heart, Aristine agreed. Now, if the story just stopped there, it could have been mistaken for some kind of romantic drama. Fortunately, Aristine's vision extended further, revealing her conviction that this man could potentially become the continent's greatest blacksmith. Tarkin, despite his claim of disinterest, keeps sneaking glances at the man who has caught Aristine's attention. As he observes, a hint of annoyance creeps into his expression. While they're chowing down on their meal, Aristine discreetly steals a quick look at that man. She notices that his hand seems perfectly intact, which is in contrast to what she recalled from her vision. The man was missing his right thumb. Though she remains unsure about how she's connected to a man whose name she doesn't even know, and why she spoke so confidently about his future in her visions, she's determined to take action now that he's injury-free, aiming to prevent that vision from becoming reality. Aristine's face lights up with pure joy as she indulges in her French Frank jelly, but sadly, it disappears in no time. Taking note of this, Tarkin, a bit bashful, offers his own French Frank jelly to Aristine. She compliments him, teasingly calling him a pervert who's a little shy, yet still a fantastic partner. Meanwhile, from a distance, other ladies observe the scene and murmur about how well matched the two of them appear to be. Their curiosity gets the best of them as they wonder what tender conversations might be exchanged between the two. Catching wind of these hushed conversations, DNA suddenly rushes out of the banquet, her heart heavy with sadness. In her haste, she accidentally bumps into someone. The man she collides with asks DNA why she's in tears and if something has happened to Tarkin. Sensing an opportunity, DNA crafts a fabricated tale. She claims to be concerned about Tarkin, suggesting that the princess he's about to marry might be showing interest in another man. The man, marked with a scar on his face, bristles with anger upon hearing this news. After the banquet, Tarkin's palace, which had been hushed for a while, suddenly burst with life. Not only because the princess from Sylvanas was a total stunner, but also because news of the queen's failed attempt to put a damper on things at the banquet had spread like wildfire. In her room, Aristine is busy jotting down her business plan. Armed with top-notch Iugo steel and a skilled blacksmith she's partnered with, she's on track to make her business a hit while also fulfilling King Nevdar's long-held desire. Her goal is to overturn the negative perceptions surrounding the Erugian people, putting an end to their unfair reputation as a barbaric nation. Out of the blue, a voice interrupts her thoughts. It's her servant who's brimming with enthusiasm. They eagerly inform Aristine that the wedding dress she's going to wear is inspired by the gown she donned at the banquet, a dress that symbolizes the unity between two nations. The servant excitedly presents Aristine with design sketches, asking for her input on the choice, even though Aristine seems fine with wearing whatever is chosen. Taking in the scene, Brody, the lady-in-waiting, wears a clear look of displeasure on her face. She openly scoffs at the whole fuss over the peace symbol, considering it all utter nonsense. But without warning, Rosaline launches into an argument with Brody. She accuses Brody of belittling the princess's accomplishments and even questions Brody's role as Aristine's lady-in-waiting. Unable to hold back, a servant steps in, yelling at them to take their fight outside. For Aristine, it's a calm day. The ladies-in-waiting no longer pester her. Instead, they're too occupied with their own brawl. The nights have all been swapped out for Irugian ones. The food is satisfying, the beds are comfortable, and even the scones are tasting better lately. Once the ladies-in-waiting are booted out, the servants go into overdrive, practically gushing with eagerness. They're begging Aristine to spill if there's anything, even the tiniest thing she's hankering for. Aristine eventually spills the beans, letting on that there's actually one thing on her mind. Blushing a little, she hesitantly admits she's in the mood for something soft, with a plush pillow popping up in her thought. However, it seems like the servants' minds might be going somewhere else, causing them to turn a bit pink. Aristine tries to set the record straight, clarifying that she's after something cozy that'll feel amazing when she kicks back. Meanwhile, Tarkin, strolling toward Aristine's room, catches wind of their conversation and can't help but pause for a beat, tuning into their chat. The servants just keep on prodding, asking if the soft thing should also be roomy. This leaves Aristine a tad puzzled, but then she clarifies that she's fine as long as it's not too narrow. There's no need for excessive space when it's wide. The servants kick things up a notch, their minds seemingly going places, wondering how close Aristine plans on snuggling up to Tarkin. Meanwhile, Tarkin comes to a halt right in front of Aristine's door, still tuning into their convo, and he starts to feel flustered. The servants finally catch on to the situation, and they're all set to arrange things, sporting big smiles. As they head out of the room, One of them remarks that she's pretty sure Tarkin is in for a surprise. Well, surprise indeed, because there's Tarkin standing right there giving her the stink eye. Caught off guard, the servants are taken aback, and in the midst of it all, Artine hails Tarkin and tells him to come on in. Meanwhile, the tussle between the ladies-in-waiting rages on, escalating even further. Abruptly, they halt in their tracks as a voice calls out to them. Their eyes widen as they lay eyes on the man, clearly shocked and trembling. The man, introducing himself as General Mukali, orders the ladies-in-waiting to convey to Artine his wish for an audience. Mukali's strong attachment to DNA stems from her elder brother, Kshatriya, who was the embodiment of loyalty, going so far as to lay down his life for their cause. Before his sacrifice, Kshatriya entrusted his little sister, DNA, into Mukali's care. So, when DNA confided in him about her recent struggles, he felt a personal responsibility to investigate the matter himself. The very thought of it ignites Mukali's anger even further, especially since there's a growing commotion about people's affection for Artine. This amplifies his determination to uncover the truth. He's set on finding concrete evidence and delving into the core of Artine's true identity. You've got quite the imagination, Mukali. I bet you'll end up being Artine's #1 pal once you actually meet her. Want another round of this series? Don't forget to smash that like button and drop a comment down below. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hope you had a fantastic time. Artine is chilling with her tea and snacks when her ladies-in-waiting suddenly barge in, telling her that General Mukali wants to see her and is already waiting. Artine doesn't know who Mukali is or why he's there, but she guesses he must be coming from Tarkin to help her out. So, she lets Mukali in. The guy walks in looking tough with a scar on his face, thinking he'll scare Artine, but she just smiles and welcomes him. Mukali gets straight to the point, mentioning he's heard Artine is looking into some guy. Artine confirms it and tells him to take a seat. Mukali is pretty shocked to find himself at a cozy tea party with her. When Artine asks if he's going to help, Mukali, still a bit thrown off, says yes. Artine then tells him to find the man. Mukali hesitates, stuck between yes and no, leaving Artine confused. Artine asks Mukali again if he's going to help her or not. Mukali seems to get a bit angry and is about to spill his real plan, but then he stops himself. He feels hesitant for a moment, but then decides to fake helping Artine to catch her off guard. He quickly switches gears, saying he'll help her investigate the guy. Artine says she's got some info on the guy from her servants, but she's still clueless about what he's into. Mukali is shocked and blurts out, asking why she's even interested in this. Without skipping a beat, Artine says she wants to flirt with the guy. Mukali is so surprised he falls right off his chair. The confusion grows as Artine talks about how this guy has different skills and physical abilities compared to Tarkin. She mentions the guy is a jeweler, and Tarkin's a warrior. Mukali looks puzzled. Artine goes on about how Iugo needs better swords to fight evolving beasts and boasts about their top-notch metalwork. Mukali is amazed she knows all this and starts to gloat about Iugo's awesome swords, forgetting he's supposed to be pretending around Artine. Then, Artine excitedly asks if Mukali's sword is one of those famous ones. Mukali gets pumped up and pulls out his massive sword to show off, not realizing one swing of it sends a gust of wind that messes up Artine's look. Mukali feels bad, worried he might have freaked Artine out with his sword swinging. He initially wanted to intimidate her, but this was just him being excited about his favorite sword. He's used to people getting scared of his scar, so he thinks Artine might be scared and cry. But to his surprise, Artine isn't scared at all. She's actually curious about the sword. Artine figures out that Mukali can really go on and on about swords. Then she realizes her tea's gone cold before she even got to enjoy it. Mukali notices the servants have bolted, probably freaked out by him. A bit awkwardly, he suggests they go have tea at his place. Artine jumps at the chance, seeing it as a cool way to get out of the palace for a bit. Tarkin and Artine's big day finally rolls around. It's all hustle and bustle as everyone's working hard to make sure things go smoothly. Aristine's crew can't stop gawking at how stunning she looks. Over at the wedding hall, it's packed with guests. All eyes are on Tarkin's main guys, Steel Sword Mukali, who's looking kind of out of place without his trusty sword, Supreme Brain Jacqueline, who's nudging Mukali to keep it cool, and Guardian Sword Durante just chilling like he always does. On her way to Aristine's waiting room, DNA bumps into some ladies and tells them she's headed to wait in the bride's waiting room. This gets the ladies thinking that Aristine might have called DNA over just to mess with her. They tell DNA they've got her back before heading off. Standing outside the bride's waiting room, DNA's lost in thought about how she once dreamed of being in there. But the royal rules mean she's just a guest. She knocks, and Aristine lets her in. Aristine's got this puzzled look that totally throws DNA off. DNA awkwardly reminds Aristine they've met before. Aristine cuts to the chase, asking why DNA's there. DNA, feeling a bit intimidated by Aristine's stunning looks, ducks her head down. She pulls herself together and says she's there to celebrate Tarkin and Aristine's wedding. Aristine just coolly says thanks. DNA sees an opening to boast about her close ties with Tarkin, but Aristine seems pretty unimpressed and bored with the chat. DNA starts talking about how marriage is usually about love between a guy and a girl, but she points out that this one's all about peace. She's trying to hint that Tarkin really loves her, not Aristine, but Aristine doesn't bite. Instead, she just thanks DNA and says she plans to have a successful marriage, just like DNA wishes. Then Aristine gets serious. She says her marriage isn't just a regular love story, but it's about something big, world peace. Hearing this, DNA clams up, trying to keep her emotions in check. In the wedding hall, Durante catches bits of a conversation about DNA and Aristine from some ladies nearby. He's got a feeling something's up, so he tells Mukali he's got to step out. Mukali is baffled. Durante always sticks close to Tarkin, so why's he heading the opposite way before even seeing Tarkin? Mukali figures something must be off. Everyone thinks Mukali is the tough guy, but in reality, Durante's the real wild card here. Back in the bride's waiting room, DNA's getting all worked up, thinking Aristine's hinting that a marriage between her and Tarkin wouldn't mean much. She's deep in her thoughts, even though she knows she can't change the situation. Out of the blue, there's a knock on the door. DNA's ticked off because she hasn't had the chance to throw shade at Aristine yet. But then in walks Durante, right after Aristine says it's okay for him to come in. Durante greets Aristine with full formal warrior respect, calling her Your Royal Highness. DNA's watching all this and starts feeling really uneasy. Aristine tells Durante it's weird to be called that already and asks him to ease up. Durante then turns to DNA, asking why she's there, leaving her stunned. DNA knows Durante isn't as laid back as Mukali and worries she might slip up. Out of the blue, Aristine spills that DNA's there to wish her well for her wedding. Durante seems relieved to hear this, and DNA nods in agreement. But then, Aristine drops that DNA was actually talking about something else too. DNA tries to jump in and explain, but Durante cuts her off, saying he's keen to know what's up. Aristine warns him it's probably going to be a snooze fest, but Durante insists on hearing it. Aristine finds the whole boyfriend bragging thing pretty yawn-worthy, but since Durante is curious, she decides to spill the beans. She figures DNA would rather have 2 people in on her boasting than just one, so Aristine plays along, ready to share DNA's earlier bragging session. So Aristine just goes ahead and tells Durante everything DNA was saying earlier, including how DNA claimed she's super close to Tarkin. Durante hears this and starts questioning why DNA's even there, congratulating Aristine and Tarkin on their wedding. Aristine confirms it and adds that DNA said their marriage is just for peace between their countries and needs to be a big success. Durante gives DNA a look that turns her white as a ghost. Aristine's watching this play out, thinking why on earth DNA would come to brag about this stuff. Bringing up a groom's supposed fling in front of the bride is pretty bold, but Aristine doesn't sweat it because her and Tarkin's relationship is not your typical story. Aristine, trying to be helpful, says she's not bothered by it. But this just seems to make Durante even more ticked off. Aristine tells Durante she's totally okay with everything. Seeing how sure she is, Durante finally gets it and asks if he can leave. But before he goes, he wishes Aristine a happy wedding. She thanks him, saying it's not the first time she's heard that today. Durante cracks a smile and corrects her. It's the first time she's hearing it. After Durante leaves, DNA starts freaking out. Just as she's about to bolt, Aristine calls out to her. DNA makes up an excuse about needing the restroom. DNA actually runs off after Durante to explain she was just giving Aristine a heads up on Tarkin's likes and dislikes. But Durante isn't buying it. He tells her he's more about actions than words. Diana's shocked Durante knew about her crush on Tarkin all along and is upset he's not on her side. Suddenly, Mukali shows up, asking Durante where he disappeared to. DNA quickly runs to Mukali, and he asks Durante why DNA's crying. Durante just says he spoke his mind, but Mukali seems skeptical. Before leaving, Durante warns that he doesn't care much about DNA's drama with Aristine. But if it messes with Tarkin, he won't stand by. DNA tells Mukali she doesn't get why Durante's acting this way, suggesting maybe Aristine badmouthed her. Mukali wonders if Aristine's involved in this somehow. Then the wedding kicks off. As Aristine enters the hall, photographers start snapping pics. Tarkin's waiting for her at the altar, and for a second, his usually cold look seems to soften. The priest starts the wedding ceremony, explaining that this isn't just any old wedding. It's a big deal because it's going to end the long-time feud between Sylvanas and Iugo. This marriage is all about bringing peace and friendship to both countries. When the priest brings up the part about the vow kiss, Tarkin looks taken aback. Aristine sees he's nervous and takes his hand, telling him the kiss is just a simple thing, no different from holding hands. Tarkin then goes for it and kisses Aristine, which gets a huge cheer from everyone. Next up is the wedding parade. Aristine and Tarkin get ready to hop on their carriage to wave at their people. The crowd is super excited, cheering for the new couple. Aristine is feeling pretty happy seeing everyone so joyful, and she starts smiling back at them. But then she notices Tarkin's serious expression and suggests he should smile too, to show they're a united, happy couple. Tarkin is still caught up in his thoughts about the kiss earlier, amazed that Aristine is acting like it's no big deal. He agrees to smile, and when he does, Aristine is just blown away by how charming his smile is. But then there's a hiccup. Something's up with the carriage, and Aristine almost falls out. Everyone's totally shocked by the accident, but as Aristine is about to fall, Tarkin grabs her in the nick of time, keeping her from hitting the ground. That's not all. Tarkin quickly pulls out his sword and cuts the carriage loose from the crazy horses. Showing off his crazy strength, he's holding Aristine with one hand and the carriage with the other, and even stops a runaway carriage with a kick. Aristine is super impressed by Tarkin's strength. Then Tarkin turns to her and checks if she's okay. As soon as Aristine figures out they're about to miss the wedding parade, she tells Tarkin to get the admins to bring another carriage, quick. Tarkin's shocked that even after almost dying in that carriage crash, Aristine's still keen on keeping the parade going. Aristine explains that if they don't, people will freak out, thinking it's a bad sign and worrying it could mess up the new piece. She's sure the Queen's crew will use it to stir up drama. Tarkin thinks the Queen will just make up excuses to not send a new carriage. But Aristine's dead set on making everyone's dreams happen. Seeing how determined she is, Tarkin whistles for his warhorse. And to everyone's amazement, this massive beast of a horse shows up. Tarkin then tightens his hold on Aristine, and they both hop on his horse. This way, they can keep the parade rolling, just like everyone's been waiting for. The next day, the newspapers are all about Tarkin and Aristine's wedding, and it's all good stuff. They're not just talking about the wild wedding parade, but they've also cooked up a romantic story about Tarkin and Aristine. The Queen's super annoyed reading all this. Even though she tried every trick in the book to delay the new carriages, it didn't work. Instead, she ended up getting dirty looks from the king. Then, out of the blue, Princess Yenica comes in, newspaper in hand, and shows the Queen some more jaw-dropping news. Tarkin and Aristine apparently broke the bed on their first night, and now everyone's gossiping about it. The Queen's just speechless and doesn't know what to say. To get the scoop on how this all started, let's rewind to the night right after the wedding parade ended. It's the big night where the newlyweds are supposed to share a bed for the first time. That evening, Aristine's maids help her with her bath. After that, they bring out this fancy lingerie, saying Tarkin picked it out for her. Aristine gives a smile, appreciating her maid's thoughtfulness. But she's not really feeling the lingerie. Without giving it much attention, she asks her maids for something comfier to wear instead. While Tarkin's out for a walk, he's trying to wrap his head around how marriage has turned his feelings into such a mess. He's thinking back to how the maids were all excited, giving him tips about everything from lingerie to the bedroom stuff. And now his mind's just swamped with all these pointless thoughts. Deep down, Tarkin knows he doesn't want to get intimate with someone he doesn't love or feel anything for. And the way Aristine's been acting makes him feel like being with her is making it tough for him to stay true to himself. He thinks of a little girl with blonde hair and realizes that she and Aristine are nothing alike. Suddenly, Aristine's voice from behind catches Tarkin off guard. He was just daydreaming about whether Aristine put on that lingerie the maids had. But then she asks him to walk with her to the wedding room, and she's wearing a different nightgown. Seeing her in that, Tarkin instantly feels less nervous. As they're walking together, he notices that Aristine always smells nice. With her rosy cheeks and in her white dress, Tarkin finds himself blushing. He thinks to himself that this is even more risky for him. When Aristine and Tarkin walk into the wedding room, they're both pretty amazed by the fancy decorations and everything in there. But they notice that the bed, considering the size of the room, is pretty small. Aristine doesn't waste any time and jumps right onto the bed, loving how soft and comfy it is. Then she realizes the bed's too small for both of them, and tells Tarkin he'll have to crash on the floor. Tarkin's kind of shocked. He was the only one stressing about the wedding night. Aristine feels bad about making Tarkin sleep on the ground, though, so she suggests they just hold hands and sleep. She tells him not to worry, emphasizing that neither of them wants to do anything more. She's even confident she can help Tarkin become king without them having to have kids. Aristine is trying to be considerate, knowing Tarkin's got someone else on his mind. Tarkin's totally surprised that Aristine knows about the little blonde girl he's been thinking about. He asks her how she figured it out. Aristine just says it's pretty obvious, but she's actually talking about DNA, not the blonde girl. Tarkin then admits that the girl is his lover, and this leads Aristine to mention she's got one more thing to negotiate. She points out that while Iugo usually sticks to monogamy, things are a bit different for an emperor. Since she's not keen on being empress, she's willing to make a deal and let Tarkin's lover have that spot instead. Tarkin is blown away that this is what Aristine had in mind. Feeling pretty grumpy, Tarkin flops onto the bed and raises his voice, reminding Aristine not to forget what she said earlier. As she lies next to him, Aristine starts wondering if she said something wrong. Then she remembers something else important and asks Tarkin if they should drop some blood on the bed to make people think they did the whole wedding night thing. Tarkin tells her that in Iugo, whether the bride is a virgin or not isn't a big deal. Plus, he mentions that there's not always blood the first time. Aristine knows that people believe the better a couple gets along, the more political power they'll have. Suddenly, she blurts out a question to Tarkin, asking if he's ever broken a bed while being intimate with his girlfriend. Tarkin sits up, totally taken aback by her question. When Aristine sees his shocked face, she quickly assumes that he hasn't actually broken a bed. This makes Tarkin go red as he admits he's never done that. But before he can say more, Aristine jumps in again, commenting that with Tarkin's muscles, she thought maybe he could have. Seeing Tarkin's face turn kind of scary, Aristine wonders if she might have accidentally wounded his ego. So, she figures giving him some compliments might be the way to boost his self-esteem. Aristine, looking pretty sure of herself, tells Tarkin that he could probably snap the bed in half with just one go, calling him a real pro in bed. Tarkin just stares at her, feeling more annoyed, and lies back down. Out of the blue, he says he's never actually broken a bed, but that doesn't mean he couldn't. Aristine, in a chipper voice, tells him she totally believes he could break the bed if he really tried. But instead of making things better, her attempts to reassure him seem to just irritate Tarkin even more. Tarkin's had enough, turns to Artine and kind of yells, insisting he can actually break the bed. This catches Artine off guard, especially when Tarkin ends up staring down at her from above. Artine, noticing Tarkin's weird expression, calls out his name. But then, Tarkin suddenly hits the bed and bam! The bed actually breaks, just like Artine was talking about. And that's the real story behind the newspaper's headline about the broken bed. Artine's in shock that Tarkin actually broke the bed, and now she's bummed out about not being able to sleep in her comfy bed. Tarkin points out that Artine was the one who kept egging him on to break the bed, and that's exactly what he did. When he sees Artine looking sad about her lost comfy bed, Tarkin moves the mattress off the broken frame and lays it on the floor, so Artine can still have her soft bed. He says he'll just sleep on the floor, but Artine insists they can sleep on the mattress together, just holding hands. As Tarkin takes her hand, they end up sleeping next to each other, hand in hand. It's Artine's first time sleeping with someone else, and slowly, she drifts off to sleep. In her dream, Artine's wandering around a forest of bread trees, super excited. She spots this really good-looking loaf and tries to grab it, even kneading it like dough. The more she looks at the bread, the more she wants to eat it. But when the bread starts to run away, she chases after it and finally takes a big bite, only for the bread to let out a loud scream. It's already morning, and Artine wakes up from falling out of bed. When she sees Tarkin, she says hi, but she's kind of thrown off by the look on his face. He's all red and holding his hands over his body, and there's a bite mark where his hands are. Artine asks Tarkin why he's looking at her that way. Tarkin, still in shock, tells her that even though they agreed to just hold hands and sleep, she was touching his chest all night. Artine is just as shocked by this and can't believe it, even thinking Tarkin might be dreaming. But when she sees the bite mark on his chest, she's totally stunned. Tarkin looks away, regretting that he took her word about just holding hands. Artine, at a loss for words and panicking, tries to explain the mix-up with her dream, then apologizes over and over. Word gets around fast about how steamy Tarkin and Artine's wedding night was. Artine's now faced with a bunch of fancy food, which confuses her. The maids are all excited, telling her to eat up so she can match Tarkin's energy. As Artine digs into the food, the maids can't help but ask, super eager, how she found the night. Artine, a bit nervous, says it was really soft and yet also really hot. She's actually talking about the bread from her dream, but the maids totally think she's talking about Tarkin. Out of nowhere, Lady Brody busts in, not bothering to knock or mind her manners, and she looks like she's ready to give Artine a piece of her mind. But the Imperial maids step in, reminding her that Artine is now their queen, and Brody needs to remember her place and follow the proper etiquette. Artine, not wanting things to get out of hand, cuts in and asks Brody what's up. Brody, still looking kind of sassy, says that those rough and tough Iugos have stirred up trouble and injured Sylvanas knights. She's pushing Artine to give the Iugos a talking to. On the same night, Tarkin and Artine accidentally broke the bed. The Iugo and Sylvanas knights were on guard duty at the palace. Out of the blue, the Iugo knights attacked the Sylvanas ones. Artine thinks about how even though there might be gossip about her and Tarkin getting along well, if their soldiers are fighting, it's not a good look for either of them. Over in Tarkin's office, he's going through a report, puzzled about this clash between the Iugo and Sylvanas knights. He turns to Durante and asks what went down. Tarkin's surprised, especially since Durante's usually so cautious, and he didn't expect him to be the one to start the trouble. Durante, the guardian holy sword, usually doesn't bother with what's going on around him. Even though he's got great insight and quick thinking, he doesn't get involved in stuff. He's only really focused on Tarkin, his boss. Durante apologizes to Tarkin and spills about what happened that night. He overheard some Sylvanas knights trash-talking Artine and even harassing her. Durante was just about to check why these knights weren't at their posts when he found out they were dissing the royal family. Mukali, who also heard this, lost his cool and went after the Sylvanas knight who was bad-mouthing the royals, which led to the brawl between the Iugo and Sylvanas knights. When Tarkin gets the lowdown on the fight, His face changes as he asks Durante if he let those guys slide for talking smack about his bride. Durante assures Tarkin that, as his sword, he made sure those knights weren't taken care of pretty neatly. Meanwhile, back with Artine. Brody's finding it awkward to tell her that all the Sylvanas knights ended up as eunuchs because of what went down. It's just too embarrassing to say out loud. The Sylvanas knights are getting checked out by a doctor who breaks it to them that they can't have kids anymore. They're now sexually disabled. This news totally floors the knights. Just then, Artine walks into the room, catching them off guard. Their attitude shifts when they see her. They're kind of moved that Artine showed up. They start blaming the Iugo knight for what's happened to them. But Artine points out that if they hadn't insulted her, the Iugos wouldn't have attacked in the first place. This makes the Sylvanas knight go pale, stammering about how honorable knights like them wouldn't say such things. So Artine throws it back, saying if that's true, then the Iugo warriors wouldn't have had any reason to go after them. The Sylvanas knight, trying to save face, quickly claims that they got hurt while hunting a magical beast to celebrate her wedding day. Artine actually already knew the scoop because she saw the whole thing through her monarch sight earlier, the Sylvanas knights dissing her. She tells them she'll write a letter for them, saying they got hurt fighting a magic beast and need to go back to their own country. All the Sylvanas knights agree and sign the letter. This move wipes out any accusations against the Iugo warriors, nixes any reason Sylvanas might have had to start a war, and gets rid of a political headache for Tarkin. Before she leaves, Artine hands them a gift, an egg, which totally baffles them. She cracks the egg with a spoon and firmly says that eggs are great for healing. The Sylvanas knight, feeling humiliated, nearly goes after Artine from behind as she's walking out. But just as things are getting tense, Tarkin shows up at the door. Seeing Tarkin, the Sylvanas knight quickly switches gears and acts like he's really digging the egg Artine gave him. When the knight blurts out that there's a monster behind the door, Artine quickly looks to check, but there's nobody there. Turns out Tarkin had already made a quick move to step away. Not just Tarkin, but his three main guys also quickly duck out of sight. While Artine's looking around, she finally spots Tarkin and asks him how long he's been there. Tarkin says he just arrived. He checks in with Artine, asking if everything's cool, and she gives him a confident smile, telling him she's got it under control. Without missing a beat, Artine grabs Tarkin's hand and suggests they head out together, promising to fill him in on the details as they go. From his hiding spot, Mukali suddenly gets upset, realizing that if Tarkin hadn't shown up, the Sylvanas knight might have tried something with Artine. This reaction surprises Jack, who thought Mukali wasn't a fan of Artine. Mukali admits he's not her biggest fan, but his issue is more with how nasty those knights were. Durante chimes in, saying that the Sylvanas guys probably saw Artine as someone they could easily manipulate. Mukali is pretty taken aback by this info. Then, Jack mentions how Artine's been getting a rough deal from Emperor Sylvanas, which really gets under Mukali's skin. But Jack switches gears to talk up Artine, saying she's something else. He points out that usually, even when things start looking up after tough times, people often can't adjust and just feel sorry for themselves. Artine's different, though. It's like she's been gearing up for this moment, blooming like a flower in no time, facing the world with a whole lot of confidence. While Tarkin and Artine are chilling and having tea, Artine fills him in on her encounter with the Sylvanas knight. But then, out of the blue, DNA shows up, heading their way. DNA comes over and says hi to Tarkin and Artine. Artine notices the newspaper in DNA's hand and quickly figures out why she's there. She's about to take off to give DNA some alone time with Tarkin, but DNA stops her, saying she needs to borrow Tarkin for a chat. Just as Artine is about to step out, Tarkin grabs her hand, telling her they're in the middle of a talk. He also reminds DNA to show some respect to Artine now that she's his wife. DNA looks pretty shocked at this and then apologizes. Artine, noticing the odd vibe between Tarkin and DNA, thinks they might be having a disagreement. She tells DNA that she's finished chatting with Tarkin and that DNA can have her time with him. Artine even offers DNA some snacks, mentioning how great the pastry chef is and that everything's yummy. DNA is a bit skeptical, wondering if Artine really knows good taste or if she's just showing off. But when DNA tries a piece of cake, she's genuinely surprised. It tastes way fancier than what she remembers from Tarkin's place, making her wonder why Tarkin, who isn't into sweets, would choose a new pastry chef. Just as Artine is about to suggest another slice of cake, she notices a shift in DNA's expression. It reminds her of that time in the bride's waiting room when DNA had to rush to the restroom. Noting the similar look on DNA's face now, Artine gently tells her not to push herself to eat. She leans in and whispers to DNA, hinting that she's aware of her stomach issues. Even though Artine is whispering, Tarkin can actually hear everything pretty clearly. DNA looks puzzled when Artine brings this up. Then, Artine mentions that time in the bride's waiting room when DNA had to dash to the restroom real quick. Hearing this, DNA's totally taken aback. She can't believe Artine is basically saying she's constipated. Artine feels bad, thinking she didn't do right by her guests. She notes that the food they had isn't great for digestion. DNA, feeling super awkward in front of Tarkin, since she's always tried to maintain her image as the perfect lady idolized by young Iugo women, starts to get a bit loud. She's ticked off that Artine doesn't seem to get it and questions whether Artine can handle being Tarkin's wife. But then she catches herself, realizing she's raising her voice in front of Tarkin. DNA has never lost her cool or shouted around him before, and now she feels like her perfect image is crumbling. Overwhelmed and without saying another word, DNA rushes out, crying, leaving both Artine and Tarkin totally confused. Over in another part of the palace, Mukhali's lost in thought, feeling pretty bad after learning about Artine's background. Then he spots DNA running by, crying, and calls out to her. DNA quickly leans on Mukhali, upset, saying Artine was mean and insulted her right in front of Tarkin. Mukhali seems a bit unsure and asks if Tarkin said anything during the incident. He also points out that since Artine's from a different culture, there might have been a misunderstanding in what she meant. DNA is surprised by Mukhali's different reaction from what she expected. Mukhali then suggests that if Tarkin didn't speak up, he's pretty sure Artine didn't mean to hurt her feelings. DNA, trying to mask her real feelings and thinking Mukhali's not being helpful, acts like she was just being too emotional. She then shifts the conversation, saying all she wants is what's best for Tarkin. She subtly suggests that maybe they should look into Artine and some other guy, hinting at starting a rumor about Artine having an affair. Mukhali's initially shocked by this idea, but then he firmly says that if Artine ever did betray Tarkin, she wouldn't be able to escape his wrath. That night, while Artine is washing her face, she tries to use her monarch's sight in the water, hoping to catch a glimpse of something useful. Staring into the water, she sees a man getting attacked. It turns out to be the blacksmith she's been looking for. He's being picked on by other blacksmiths who are jealous of him. One of the bullies pulls out a dagger with a fancy design and uses it to hurt the blacksmith. Seeing this through her monarch's sight, Artine realizes the blacksmith's missing thumb wasn't an accident. She decides she needs to recruit this blacksmith quickly. With this in mind, she plans to meet up with Mukhali the next day. The next day, Artine heads over to Mukhali's place. Over there, Mukhali is getting a bit annoyed with his servants, who are all hyped up to make him look good because Artine is coming over. He insists that he's Mukhali, the tough and no-nonsense warrior. Trying to chill out a bit, he wonders if maybe Artine didn't do anything wrong after all. When Artine shows up and calls out to him, Mukhali totally forgets to play it cool. He dashes over to her, all excited, which definitely surprises his servants. Artine thanks him for standing up for her with the Sylvanas Knights, and this compliment makes Mukhali blush big time. Mukhali, acting all gentlemanly, invites Artine for a walk around the place. People watching this change in his behavior start wondering if this is how he usually acts. Feeling a bit shy, Mukhali admits to Artine that he wasn't the one who broke the eggs of the Sylvanas Knights, but he did yank out their teeth first, calling himself a merciful guy. As they're enjoying their tea and snacks, Artine suddenly mentions how Mukhali once offered to help her, which catches Mukhali off guard. She goes on to explain that she wants to meet a certain man today, and she'd like Mukeli to come along. She also asks him to keep it a secret from Tarkin. When they roll up in Catalaman, the blacksmith is totally caught off guard by their unexpected visit and invites them in. Once inside, Artine is super impressed by all the blacksmithing work around. She takes a good look at the top-notch weapons hanging on the wall and asks the blacksmith, Philip, if any of the stuff was made by a guy named Retrin. Philip tells her that none of Retrin's creations are up on that wall. Artine's feeling a bit puzzled because from what she saw with her monarch sight, she was pretty convinced Retrin was on his way to becoming a top blacksmith. Just then, Mukeli interrupts her thoughts when he spots an empty hanger with the name Retrin on its tag. Philip then recalls that it used to hold a dagger Retrin made, and it was a pretty cool piece. This jogs Artine's memory of what she saw in the monarch's sight. Philip goes on to say that the dagger was there until just yesterday, and there's a special lock that only the admin can open. Artine asks if the dagger had topaz inlaid in it. Philip seems surprised that Artine knows about the dagger, but he confirms it. That's when Artine realizes that Retrin might be in trouble now. Right as it's about to go down, with Retrin almost getting hurt, Artine shows up just in time to stop it. When the guys realize it's her, they're scared stiff. Artine steps up and tells the bully to hand over the dagger. The bully's a bit hesitant at first, but then he hands it over to Artine. After she gets the dagger, Artine gives it back to Retrin, who's still looking pretty shocked. With a big smile, she compliments him on the great job he did with the dagger. After everything settles down, Mukeli shares his concern about Artine acting rashly earlier, and he's worried she might have gotten hurt. Artine notices how worried Mukeli looks and reassures him that with him by her side, she's all good. Mukeli seems really touched by her words. But just then, Balaton, the head blacksmith of Catalaman, comes storming in, furious at his kids for causing all that chaos. Balaton quickly says sorry to Artine for the mess and also thanks her for stepping in before things got really bad. Artine, without missing a beat, asks him what the deal was with all that commotion. Balaton then starts explaining how he saw Retrin as the ideal person to take over his work one day. After spotting Retrin's talent, Balaton took him under his wing, teaching him the ropes from scratch. Turns out, a bunch of people, including his own son, were green with envy over Retrin's skills, which were pretty top-notch. Recently, Retrin mentioned that he's more into sitting at a desk than hammering away at the forge. He's kind of moved on from making swords and started doing his own unique stuff. Artine's concerned that if she keeps sticking up for Retrin, it might stir up more bad feelings. She's worried all that bottled-up anger could eventually blow up in Balaton's direction. Out of nowhere, Artine puts on a show of being really freaked out. She tells them that thinking back to the earlier scuffle freaks her out, since it's the first time she's ever seen swords pointed at people like that. She says she's already super scared, so she can only imagine how terrified Retrin must have been. She wants to head over to Retrin's place to say something to cheer him up. Mukeli's standing there, hardly able to believe what he's hearing, especially since this is the same Artine who was all praises for what he did to those Sylvanas knights. At Retrin's spot, he's holding something and can't stop thinking about how gutsy Artine was to jump in and save him. But his thoughts are cut short by a knock at the door. He's totally surprised to see Artine when he opens it. He drops to his knees right away, all nervous, and starts thanking her. Artine reaches out her hand and tells him to stand up. She tells him she's just glad he didn't get hurt, which makes Retrin's face turn super red. Artine suddenly spots something in Retrin's hand and asks him to show it to her. Retrin hesitantly opens his hands, revealing a cute little animal craft. Artine is amazed by it, and Retrin shows her more of his creations lined up on a shelf. As Retrin talks about his work, Artine realizes he's exactly the person she's been looking for. She compliments his creations, but Retrin seems down on himself, thinking he's just making stuff that's not practical. Artine confidently tells him he's just been growing his talents in the wrong place. She sees Retrin as a genius who doesn't just follow conventional ideas, but brings his own inspirations to life. Her words take Retrin by surprise. Artine then tells him he's the only one who can make what she's looking for. Mukali, watching Artine talk to Retrin, is curious about what she's up to. Artine offers to take Retrin with her, believing he has the potential to be the best blacksmith in the world. Aristine's back in her room, lying on her bed, feeling that mix of being wiped out but still wired from her trip to Catalaman. Then out of nowhere, Tarkin's voice gives her a jolt, asking about her and Mukali's jaunt to Catalaman. She explains it was all about snagging a blacksmith. Tarkin's puzzled, wondering who'd want to ditch Catalaman since it's so well known. But Artine, flashing a confident grin, tells him she's got someone who's even said they'd be hers. Hearing that, Tarkin's really itching to press her for details, kinda aggressively. But he's worried it'll look like he's got a thing for her, which would be weird since they're technically married but really just business partners. Still, he can't help being super curious about what went down and tries to play it cool. But then Artine clocks that Tarkin's got something on his mind and wonders if he's stressing about her diving into business solo for the first time. Tarkin seizes the moment to get into what's been bugging him, asking why the blacksmith would want to be Artine's when he's just supposed to be an employee. Artine tells him not to sweat it about Retrin. Her brush-off only gets Tarkin more intrigued, so he leans in closer, pushing for why she's so keen on having Retrin on board. Artine says Retrin's a stand-up guy and tells Tarkin to quit throwing shade. Plus, she drops that it was her idea for Retrin to be hers in the first place. Tarkin's pretty stunned by that bombshell. Artine's grinning, saying Retrin's her first hire, so she's gotta look after him well. She shoves Tarkin's face away, telling him it's time to hit the hay. Just as she's about to nod off, Tarkin, not happy with her answer, yanks her blanket off, jolting her awake. Artine shook. Can't believe Tarkin's acting all pouty and messing with her sleep. Snatching her blanket back, Artine tells Tarkin to crash with her, swearing she'll just hold his hand this time. Tarkin, still a bit grumpy, ends up lying next to her, hand in hand. When Artine teases about singing him a lullaby, Tarkin's quick to say he's no kid. Linking his fingers with hers, Tarkin brings up how he was her first biz partner and wonders if she'll look out for him too. Artine, caught off guard but then softening, insists she's been doing a pretty good job of that, and Tarkin can't help but agree. As Artine's drifting off, she half mumbles that Tarkin's got to up his game, leaving him puzzled in the dark, trying to figure out what she meant by wanting him to work harder. Next day, out on the training field, Tarkin's blowing off steam big time, and everyone's picking up on his foul mood. He catches Mukali showing the ropes to a newbie, but it's Mukali's impressive build that really grabs Tarkin's attention, making him go all stern-faced. Tarkin flags Mukali down, who's totally taken aback when Tarkin, with that intense look, says they need to have a chat. Tarkin hits Mukali with a curveball, asking if anything went down when he and Artine hit up Catalaman. Mukali's caught off guard but quickly flips the vibe, assuring Tarkin it was all pretty standard stuff. Tarkin's not buying it though, especially since Mukali is the type to go on forever about Sylvanian princess. Catching the hint of suspicion on Tarkin's face, Mukali decides to come clean, hinting there's actually a bit of a story he thinks Tarkin should hear. That gets Tarkin all ears, his curiosity piqued. Mukali's all hyped up, spilling to Tarkin about this epic sword the blacksmith crafted, going on about how awesome it was and that Tarkin missed out by not seeing it firsthand. Tarkin's let down though, that wasn't what he was fishing for. He really wanted Mukali to dish on what kind of guy Artine's into. Then Mukali hits Tarkin with another tidbit. Turns out, Bolaton hooked him up with this mask as a gift. Mukali's pretty sure Bolaton didn't mean any harm by it and actually put a ton of work into making it. But the moment Mukali checked out the mask, he got the message loud and clear: it's better to cover up his scar. Hearing this, Tarkin can't help but think Bolaton's gesture was kinda pointless. He's guessing maybe Bolaton whipped up the mask so folks wouldn't gossip about Mukali's looks. Mukali comes from a line of top-notch generals. Not too long ago, while on his rise to fame, he ended up with a massive scar across his face. Initially, he was all about embracing it, claiming a scar was nothing to hide. But it's obvious he's been struggling with how differently folks treat him now versus before the scar. People would look away. mumbling it was no big deal, trying to ignore the scar's existence. Yet, when it came down to it, they'd comment on how great the mask looked on him. That kind of two-faced behavior is really starting to mess with Mukali. Just as Tarkin's about to say something, Mukali jumps in, telling him he ended up not taking the mask. He explains that when Artine pointed out the mask could be annoying in battle, despite Bolotan explaining it wasn't meant for combat, Artine doubled down, asking if her point was off because she sees Mukali as a true warrior meant for the battlefield. That's when it hit Mukali. Artine never looked at the mask as a way to hide his scar, but accepted him and his scar just as they are. Mukali mentions feeling a whole lot better since that realization. Tarkin cracks a smile listening to Mukali's tale, noticing how Mukali seems way more lit up than before. Mukali goes on to say he passed on the mask and chose pig iron instead, figuring the new blacksmith would be needing loads of it once he sets up shop, helping Artine cut costs. But then Tarkin throws a curveball, asking if the new guy is Ritrin. Mukali suddenly looks like a deer in headlights, clams up, while Tarkin, giving him the intense stare down, pushes for a yes or no on Ritrin being the blacksmith. Mukali, though, makes a break for it, mumbling something about needing the bathroom, leaving Tarkin both baffled and ticked off. But thinking back on the story Mukali shared earlier, picturing Artine in his mind makes Tarkin smile. On the flip side, after bolting, Mukali's feeling pretty relieved he dodged Tarkin's interrogation, mainly because he had already pinky promised Artine to zip it. Artine had this whole surprise planned for Tarkin, and she even told Mukali he'd be the first to test out the prototype once it's ready. After his trip to Catalaman with Artine, Mukali's eyes are opened. She's all about creating and building stuff. Clearing away his initial suspicions, he's now sure of one thing. Artine's heart is in her work, not with another guy. He's even come to respect her big time, realizing she's not only a perfect match for his boss, but also genuinely a solid person he'd proudly pledge his loyalty to. Feeling like everything's finally making sense, Mukali's pumped to spill the beans to DNA. But then, he hits a mental speed bump, feeling a bit off. Replaying the conversations, he wonders why DNA was suspicious in the first place. That makes him think, maybe there's more to dig into. In front of a big crowd and a priest, the two countries finally made peace. For a bit, the newspapers were all over the story, even snapping pics of the newlyweds' bedroom, causing a media frenzy outside Tarkin's place. But the buzz died down a bit after Sir Durante's show stopping act. During this quieter time, Artine brought Ritrin on board. And as magnolia petals drifted down, the Sylvanian crew, done with their gig, took the right portal out of there, dodging any small spats from escalating into big drama. Just as things settled, Artine got a visitor. The Queen's court lady pops into Artine's room out of nowhere, saying the Queen wants to hang out. Artine thinks it's perfect timing, especially after catching the scoop on Prince Hamir in the papers, and decides to take up the invitation. At the Queen's palace, the Queen and the princesses are chilling in the garden, sipping tea and having a blast chatting. When Artine shows up, they kinda give her the cold shoulder, just continuing their convo. But eventually, the Queen spots Artine and the princesses catch on too. Artine says hi back, but she can tell they're not exactly thrilled to have her as part of the royal clan. The Queen then wonders out loud if it's cool to ditch the formal talk now that Artine's officially in the fam. Usually, a mother-in-law chills on the formality with her daughter-in-law. But since Artine's from Sylvanian royalty, there's that question mark on keeping it polite. Artine, all smiles, tells the Queen to go ahead and keep it casual. Out of the blue, Yenneca pops the question about whether Hamir's coming back soon, and the Queen's all happy to say yes. She even goes on about how quick Hamir was to hit her up the moment she mentioned missing him. The rest of the princesses are beaming, super proud of their bro. Hamir, the first prince, who ditched the wedding, really stirred up the news. It struck everyone as odd that he'd miss such a landmark wedding that also sealed a peace deal, especially being next in line to the throne. Officially, the word is he was off doing some super secret government stuff. Yet, The rumor spreaders are buzzing that Hamir skipped out on purpose because he wasn't thrilled about Tarkin gaining more political power. Aristine's thinking, if the queen went to all the trouble to call Hamir back from some remote spot without a portal, it seems like she got pretty jittery about Aristine tying the knot with Tarkin. With that thought, Aristine figures she might as well dig into the treats available, asking a server to hook her up. She's got her own agenda, snack time first. She figures, Hamir showing up or not, there's no point fretting about stuff that hasn't even gone down yet. Munching on her snacks, Aristine can't help but think the desserts back at her own palace taste way better. The queen and the princesses are pretty thrown off by how cool Aristine is acting. They're shocked that she doesn't seem the least bit embarrassed, even though they were pretty much ignoring her. The queen, on the other hand, is getting annoyed, thinking Aristine doesn't bring much to the table and feeling frustrated that she's somehow helped Tarkin, who's just a concubine's son and known for dealing with border demonic beasts, climb up the ranks so fast. The queen's thinking about how in politics, yesterday's foe can be today's buddy, and today's buddy might be tomorrow's adversary. She figures Aristine hasn't really gotten a taste of their clout yet. So, she plans to give Aristine a wake-up call about what it really means to marry Tarkin. Starting a chat with Aristine, the queen casually mentions she hasn't met her son yet, kinda hinting that Aristine may have hitched her wagon to a losing horse. She asks Aristine if she's not even a bit curious about the guy who's set to be the next king of Iugo. Aristine's totally thrown for a loop when she finds out Hamir's been grinding away in a magic stone mine. The queen piles on, mentioning they're talking big-time quantities of top-tier, grade stones. She figures Aristine's gotta understand how crucial Hamir's task is. That gets Aristine thinking, maybe Hamir skipping the wedding was because his official gig was the kind he couldn't just broadcast to everyone. Magic stones are the real deal around here. They power everything from national defense shields and teleport portals to regular stuff like photo orbs and phones. Literally, they're in everything. If we're talking a massive magic stone mine, it's gotta be stirring up a lot of talk worldwide. This could even be a game changer for Iugo's standing. With Hamir running this show, Aristine can't help but feel super jealous. It's like he's got the ultimate win button. Makes her think they were born with a whole different level of golden spoon compared to her. However, the queen misreads Aristine's jealous look, thinking she's nailed it by flaunting her clout. She goes on and on about her son, Hamir, laying out why he's been given such a big deal of a job for the nation. She even starts throwing shade at Tarkin without dropping his name, hinting at someone low-class who scavenges mana stones from monster carcasses. She's all about highlighting that her son is throne material through and through, from his lineage to his skills and character. Aristine keeps her face neutral and says she gets it, thinking to herself that the queen's obviously pitting Hamir against Tarkin. But the queen doesn't stop there. She goes overboard praising her son, saying he's drop-dead gorgeous and that women can't stop throwing themselves at him. Even though it bugs Aristine, she figures arguing with the queen is pointless since she'd just spin everything Aristine says. After all, even a porcupine thinks its babies are soft and shiny. Aristine, doing her best to keep cool and sipping her tea, listens to the queen go on and on about her son, thinking it's a bit much. After the queen called her over out of the blue to hear all about her son's ventures that Aristine has no clue about or interest in, and then all this talk about how good-looking he is, Aristine can't help but question the queen's motives. The suggestion of introducing her to Hamir throws Aristine for a loop, and it's starting to dawn on her what this might all be about. The queen's making it sound like a tough choice for Aristine, but is all about giving her the opportunity to meet Hamir just the once, convinced Aristine will be sold on him after that. But Aristine isn't having any more of the queen's son fluffing and cuts in to remind her. Look, I'm already someone's wife. It's almost surreal for Aristine. Like, is this really happening? Is her mother-in-law actually trying to set her up on a blind date? With her voice wavering, she lays it out again, stressing, I'm married no matter how much the queen goes on. This totally floors the queen and the princesses. They're so shocked they can't even spit out a word. Then Yenneca flips, cranking up the volume, incredulous that her brother's getting turned down by Aristine like this. Aristine's left scratching her head, given Yenneke's not her biggest fan, so she thinks Yenneke would be thrilled about the rejection. But Artine makes it clear, despite everything, she's still Yenneke's sister-in-law, and that's not about to change. Watching all this unfold, Pelamion is hitting peak frustration, regretting even showing up. She steps in to try and chill Yenneke out, pointing out Artine was just laying out the facts. Yenneke's still fuming, but the queen gives her a sign to zip it, and tries to smooth things over, suggesting Artine might have got the wrong end of the stick. She was just chatting about her son, not trying to stir anything up. Yenneke smirks, thinking she's scored a point, convinced her big bro is leagues ahead of Artine's hubby. But the queen throws Yenneke for a loop by saying it's a shame Artine's already hitched given how great her son is. The queen goes on, warning Artine not to come crying later, suggesting she'll regret it if she doesn't play ball now. She hints at a future where Hymir's king and Artine might find herself on thin ice, rights-wise, if she snubs the queen's offer. Artine's left gobsmacked by the queen's spiel about how they could have had a close mother-daughter vibe. Over at Tarkin's place, Jack hits up Tarkin with the news that the queen summoned Artine to her palace. He throws in that Princess Pelamion and Yenneke were hanging there too. When Jack's wondering what to do next, Tarkin's advice is to just chill and not do anything about it. Saw that coming. Dealing with political drama is part of the princess consort gig. Plus, Artine herself brought this up when they were hashing things out before tying the knot. This is all in a day's work, pretty much like her job as Tarkin's business ally. If Artine's ticked off by the queen and princesses giving her a hard time, that's not really Tarkin's problem. Tarkin then tells Jack they need to focus on dealing with the demonic beasts right now, saying he's not in the headspace to bother with petty stuff. As Tarkin strides off, Jack's surprised and points out Tarkin's actually heading towards the queen's palace. Tarkin, without a word, picks up the pace, making Jack tell him to ease up. Out of the blue, Tarkin suggests they take a walk, catching Jack off guard as he's practically dragged along. Jack's baffled. They're power walking towards the queen's place. When Tarkin and Jack make it to the queen's palace, Tarkin's rooted to the spot, overhearing the chat between the queen and his wife, Artine. In her head, Artine replays the queen's earlier question and begins to catch on. She then calmly dishes out her reply, bringing up the old saying a mother-in-law who's like your own mom doesn't exist. Pointing out the queen's comment about her being married, Artine shoots back that she doesn't see it as unfortunate at all. She makes it clear that her hubby's doing just fine in her book. Artine's comeback seems to hit the queen where it hurts. The queen's caught off guard by the range of opinions about someone. She goes on to call Artine downright heartless, shocked that she got turned down. The queen figured Artine had at least some political smarts. Then she gets real, saying since it's just them, she'll lay it out. She doesn't have any strong personal feelings toward Artine, but she finds her all right. Artine's a bit taken aback by the queen's honesty, wondering what kind of nonsense that is. The queen accuses Artine of wrecking her life because she's blinded by love. When Artine hears the word love, she realizes that she only sees Tarkin as a business partner, even though others might think she's smitten. The queen mentions she was considering giving Artine a seat next to Pelamion, to which Pelamion agrees Artine deserves. Even Yenneke tries to stir things up. Then the queen adds that if Artine wants noble treatment, she needs to act the part. As her daughter-in-law, while she has the right to be treated with care, it's unfortunate because Artine's sticking up for a child of a lowly concubine, setting herself up for a tough road. The queen laughs, calling it something out of a lame romance novel. Meanwhile, in their hiding spot, Jack steps in to prevent Tarkin from marching right up to the queen. He pleads with Tarkin to hold back, pointing out that it's the queen's palace, and it's a ladies' tea on top of that. He warns Tarkin that he'll end up tangled in all sorts of gossip if he barges in. Tarkin relents and heeds Jack's advice, opting to observe Artine from a distance instead. For Artine, love isn't something she can afford. Her heart turned to stone when she was just 6. It's been ages since it's felt anything close to normal. Artine wonders why the queen and the princesses didn't just curse her out and shame her instead of going after Tarkin, who wasn't even around. She admits Tarkin can be a handful and isn't always truthful. However, Palameon notices Aristine's serious expression and interrupts her thoughts, asking what it is about Tarkin that she finds so appealing. Aristine is caught off guard by the sudden question, and Tarkin and Jack from their hiding spot are equally surprised. Trying to come up with a good reason, Aristine blurts out that it's because Tarkin is really good at breaking the bed. This leaves Tarkin red-faced, and even the princesses are flustered. Not wanting to be outdone, Palameon and Yenneca scramble to praise Hamir again. However, to their surprise, the queen is speechless. Being married longer than anyone else present, she knows just how important sexual compatibility with one's spouse is. The queen appears frustrated as she reluctantly admits she understands. However, Tarkin can't just sit back and watch. He's about to say something, but Jack swiftly covers his mouth and tries to stop him. Jack can't help but think that Aristine is truly incredible to have the queen reconsider her opinions. Yenneca, going too far, declares that what's truly important is that her brother is far more remarkable than Aristine's husband. She even goes as far as to say that it doesn't make any sense for someone born from a lowly concubine to reign over others. Upon hearing Yenneca's sharp words, Aristine calmly asks Yenneca if she's implying that her husband's status is inferior because he's the son of a concubine. Caught off guard, Yenneca realizes she's revealed too much of her true feelings in the heat of the moment. She quickly tries to backtrack, claiming that Aristine is twisting her words. However, Aristine doesn't back down. She asserts that Tarkin is not someone to be spoken ill of just because they consider him lowly. With a cold gaze, Aristine questions Yenneca if she's suggesting that King Nevdar's biological son is of lowly birth. As Yenneca struggles to find a response to Aristine, the queen steps in to intervene. She acknowledges that Tarkin's birth mother wasn't of noble birth. Aristine calmly responds, noting that despite Tarkin's mother not having a title initially, she was formally granted the title of royal concubine for bearing a royal offspring. Aristine reminds the queen that she herself bestowed this title upon Tarkin's mother. The queen is caught off guard by Aristine's statement, remarking on how she couldn't possibly forget that humiliating moment. It's like feeling a bug touching her fingertips. Demonic beasts occasionally wreak havoc in the south of Iugo. The Sylvanas Empire shares its border with Iugo. There are also influential clans within Iugo aiming for autonomy. To garner support swiftly amid this chaos, Nevdar opted for a political union with the most influential clan, and he also selected concubines strategically useful for politics, a responsibility overseen by the queen. That was the plan until Nevdar unexpectedly fell in love with a commoner of low status who had no political value. Yet, because she bore his royal heir, she was granted a noble title. While wiping her hands, the queen lays it out bluntly, referring to Tarkin as a filthy halfling since his mother was granted the title while pregnant. She appears uneasy, muttering about how a pureblood and a halfling could be considered equals when everyone is meant to play a specific role. Then she shocks everyone by shouting that a filthy halfling should stick to butchering things, not meddling in palace affairs. Aristine is left speechless by the queen's statement, wondering if the queen even considers the impact of her actions on Tarkin. When Tarkin's mother passed away, the queen sent him straight to the border plains infested with demonic beasts, armed with just a sword. Aristine found out from Durant that Tarkin didn't receive any backup or supplies. Before they could even strategize, Tarkin was forcefully transported through the warp gate. Essentially, Tarkin was sent out to face certain death. Aristine's furious, thinking the queen's talk about noble bloodlines is ridiculous, considering she lacks even a shred of compassion and sent a child off to die. Aristine ponders about the child who lost his mother and was promptly abandoned on the demonic beast plains, all by himself. Despite his mother passing away early due to illness, her death seemed to spark more gossip than her life ever did. Yet that man, he kept surviving, refusing to succumb to death's grip time and time again. Remembering how the queen and the others referred to Tarkin as just a child born of a lowly concubine, Aristine reaches her boiling point. Feeling it's incredibly unfair, she passionately defends Tarkin, asserting that he protected Iugo by slaying demonic beasts on the plains and played a significant role in the war with Sylvanas. With fiery determination, she declares Tarkin as the hero who saved the nation, emphasizing that even someone from an enemy nation like herself recognizes Tarkin's bravery. Artine questions why the queen is so focused on belittling an Iugoan prince like Tarkin. Artine also points out that if the queen's anger is directed towards the king, that's somewhat understandable. Upon hearing this, the queen rises from her seat, her expression turning furious as she advances towards Artine. With a menacing glare, the queen warns Artine that she better not say another word. Taming, sensing trouble, tries to signal to Artine to stop provoking the queen. But Artine stands her ground, suggesting that the queen should be a bit prouder of her son. As tensions escalate, the queen raises her hand, poised to slap Artine. Suddenly, Tarkin appears, just in the nick of time, and intervenes to stop the queen. He questions her, asking if she was about to raise her hand against his wife. However, instead of calming down, the queen becomes even more enraged, demanding that Tarkin remove his hand instantly. Tarkin remains composed, insisting that the queen answer his question first. But the queen shows no signs of stopping her tirade. Eventually, Tarkin's stern glare and menacing aura silence the queen, leaving her stunned. Even the other princesses are frozen in place, witnessing a bloodthirsty, murderous aura that they've never experienced before, having grown up sheltered like delicate flowers in a glass house. Observing the tense situation, Artine quickly calls out to Tarkin. Upon hearing his wife's voice, Tarkin gradually calms down and turns to face Artine, who stands there watching him attentively. With a release of his grip on the queen's hand, the queen falls to the ground in shock. Helping her mother, who can't stand, Yennefer, also in a fury, shouts at Tarkin, threatening to inform Hamir upon his return and convince him to expel Tarkin, ensuring he can never leave the borderlands again. Unfazed by Yennefer's outburst, Tarkin, prepared to depart with Artine, calmly responds to her, challenging her to do her best if she can. While strolling back to Tarkin's palace, Tarkin holds Artine's hand in silence. Artine starts to wonder if Tarkin was going to say something to her, given his sudden rush into the queen's palace and then swiftly taking her away. She calls out Tarkin's name and stops him in his tracks. Tarkin pauses, noticing the concern in Artine's eyes, and then slumps down, prompting Artine to worryingly inquire if something is amiss. Tarkin hides his face, swearing he's all right, but deep down, he's too choked up to say how much it means to him that Artine had his back. Instead, he keeps saying her name over and over, trying to get his feelings across. But when they get closer, all Tarkin sees is Artine looking annoyed. She threatens to yell and call him a pervert if he doesn't cut it out, pushing him to finally say something. Tarkin then throws it back at her, asking if she's noticed how quick she is to get mad. Confused, Artine realizes no one's ever called her out on that before. Hiding behind some bushes, Jack can't wrap his head around the fact that Tarkin ditched him after dragging him to the queen's palace to have fun with his wife. Earlier, when Tarkin had a run-in with the queen, Jack was freaking out about getting caught while still in hiding. Now, he's upset because Tarkin left him all alone, all because of his new love interest. Thankfully, Durante got him out of the palace mess. Jack's blown away that Tarkin, who used to not give a second glance at women and seemed way more at home in a fight than in palace life, has done a total 180 since meeting Artine. Getting this, Jack's actually feeling a bit better. He's also kinda glad that when Tarkin broke the bed, it wasn't in his usual wrecking stuff style. Although, truth be told, it was really in his usual wrecking stuff style, Jack. But one thing's crystal clear in this palace jam packed with nothing but rivals. Tarkin's got at least one person who's genuinely got his back. Out in the desert, a letter from the royal palace makes its way to Hamir, the first prince with long blonde hair. His mom, the queen, fills him in on the latest palace issues. Hamir thinks he's too tied up with work to leave, despite his team pointing out how tense things are getting back home. He figures it's not a big deal, trusting the queen to manage on her own like she always does. Yet, when Hamir spots Artine's photo in the news he's checking out, he finds himself curious about the woman who's got the queen all stressed. The next morning, Artine is getting ready to head to the blacksmith, brimming with excitement as her business venture finally kicks off. Lady Brody watches Artine through the window, mulling over her solo trips to the male-dominated blacksmith. She critiques Artine's outfit, deeming it too revealing and lacking decorum, and predicts that Tarkin will soon disapprove. Jealous of Artine's cheerful demeanor, Brody wonders what could possibly be making her so happy, feeling it's unfair compared to her own circumstances. At Tarkin's palace's blacksmith, Artine is already waiting for his meeting with Artine, feeling all jittery. He's trying to figure out what Artine wants him to make, that she's treating him so nicely. He's wondering if it's a tough-to-mold phosphophylite necklace, a hard-to-process fluorite bracelet from the Occidental coast, or maybe a hair accessory woven with amethyst to match her eyes. But for some reason, whenever he looks at her, he can't shake the image of a pure white sword that resembles her. The more he ponders, the more frustrated he gets. Suddenly, Artine calls out his name, catching him off guard. Artine asks Artine what's been occupying his mind so intensely. Artine warmly greets Artine with proper manners, but she tells him there's no need for all that formality since they'll be working together often. Despite her insistence, Artine continues to kiss her hand, insisting it's his way of showing respect. With a grin, he asks Artine what project she has in mind. Artine reveals the blueprint she brought, explaining it's for a sword that saves people. However, as Artine examines the blueprint, he's surprised to realize it's actually for medical scalpels. Artine becomes intrigued as he examines the details of the scalpels. Artine explains that she wants a scalpel with a completely new design, breaking away from traditional principles. However, Artine shares his concerns, mentioning that many blacksmiths avoid this line of work because if a surgery goes wrong, the blame often falls on the scalpel. This reluctance means that most blacksmiths focus on making swords instead. For them, producing tools and scalpels is just a side gig, done with honor. Moreover, entering the medical market is tough due to the risks involved in being held responsible for medical mishaps. Despite the challenges, Artine sees this as the perfect opportunity to enter the business. Furthermore, the practicality of this scalpel design has been demonstrated in Monarch's sight, which gives Artine confidence in its effectiveness. Although Artine didn't come up with the design herself, she feels a bit like she's taking credit for someone else's work. However, she believes that sometimes you have to be bold to make a fortune. Artine enthusiastically agrees, noting that with improved scalpel quality, there will likely be fewer medical accidents and fewer failed surgeries, ultimately leading to healthier people. He admits he was short-sighted for only focusing on the negatives earlier, and concludes that Artine's goal is truly noble, to save lives. With a determined look, Artine expresses his admiration for Artine's compassionate heart. No matter how much Artine tries to explain that her main goal is making money, Artine doesn't seem to listen and keeps praising her, leaving her speechless. Feeling a bit guilty, Artine decides she'll explain it to Artine later. She then asks him when the prototype will be ready. Artine, brimming with confidence, says he's got all the sketches in his mind and tells Artine to sit back and enjoy her tea, promising to be back before it cools. Surprised and impressed, Artine nods in agreement. Throughout her life, Artine has been constantly judged. With her silver hair and violet eyes, the most striking features that have the potential to awaken the monarch's sight, her father relentlessly pushed her to unlock her power. He used all sorts of tricks and methods, putting her in danger in his pursuit. Yet, unbeknownst to him, Artine had already awakened her abilities. She chose not to inform her father about her awakening. When she was just 6 years old, she found herself in a situation where her young self felt completely helpless and unable to cope alone. Desperate not to face the possibility of death, she reached out, seeking help from anyone who might be able to assist her. That memory remains vivid in her mind, a moment when she felt like she was being thrust into another world entirely. Now, back in the blacksmith's workshop, where Artine is hard at work. Artine waits patiently, the rhythmic clang of the hammer against metal sounding more like music to her ears than noise. She watches in awe as Artine skillfully completes his task, and with a proud grin, he presents her with the prototype of the scalpel she requested. Examining it closely, Artine can't help but express her admiration for Ritrin's craftsmanship and the speed with which he completed the task. Ritrin, visibly pleased by the praise, suggests that the spirits of the blacksmiths must have been inspired by Artine's vision, allowing him to work with such efficiency. However, Artine is still amazed, carefully examining the details of the scalpel. She then tests it out by slicing through a piece of paper, effortlessly shaping it into various forms. Artine feels satisfied with the result, noting its precision even without applying much force. Once again, she praises Ritrin for his genius craftsmanship. But Ritrin returns the praise, attributing the brilliance of the design to Artine. Artine can't help but feel a twinge of guilt, knowing she wasn't the one who came up with it. She explains that she simply observed everything that caught her eye and envisioned the part she desired. Hearing this, Ritrin looks a bit puzzled. Nonetheless, Artine flashes him a smile, saying, "There's something like that." In the past 1,000 years, the monarch's sight has been a rare thing. Artine isn't sure if there have been others like her, but unlike those who naturally had the ability, she can control the monarch's sight of her past life. The first time it happened, she felt like she was dead. She couldn't touch anything or talk to anyone. It was like being stuck in a world where she could only watch. But when she saw this girl for the first time, something clicked inside her. She just knew. Even though the girl was different in personality, appearance, and age, Artine recognized her instantly that the girl was herself. As Artine's father mentioned, the trial pushed people, including those with the monarch's sight, to evolve to a higher level. It was during those critical moments of near-death experiences that she could glimpse scenes from her past at her own will. The Artine from her past life made countless decisions that puzzled her. In particular, she couldn't fathom why her past self would willingly donate her liver for her father's transplant. However, that decision now proves beneficial to her present self, as she's familiar with medical equipment due to those experiences. Apart from that, by recording surgery scenes, medical dramas, and documentaries she had seen in her past life, Artine meticulously observed, paused, rewound, and replayed those moments. By scrutinizing various scenes from different angles repeatedly, she managed to replicate them. This effort yielded a fairly decent blueprint. Ritrin mentions that he'll require a bit more time to craft the other models of scalpels from the blueprint. He suggests that for the time being, they should focus on perfecting the basic design, a proposition Artine agrees with. As they delve into discussing the scalpel, suddenly someone calls out to Artine. It's none other than Tarkin, who appears with a somewhat annoyed expression, startling both Artine and Ritrin. At that moment, Artine and Ritrin are standing very close to each other. Artine asks Tarkin what brings him there, but his expression only grows more serious. Tarkin advises Artine to check the time, warning her that if she keeps at it, she'll end up skipping dinner too. Artine is surprised when she glances at the window and sees that it's already dark outside. She remarks that she hadn't realized time had passed so quickly, a sentiment echoed by Ritrin, who hadn't noticed either. Tarkin stands there, glaring at Ritrin, who apologizes to Artine for taking up so much of her valuable time. Tarkin appears annoyed, wondering if Ritrin is Artine's type. As Tarkin steps closer, Artine quickly shouts, halting him in his tracks. Tarkin is taken aback and rendered speechless, unable to grasp why Artine has stopped him. However, Artine swiftly explains that she's in the midst of a business discussion and asks Tarkin to hold on for a moment while she finishes up. Tarkin seems disappointed by her response. Even though the product is already impressive, Artine feels a bit hesitant about showing it to Tarkin for some unknown reason. She wants to present him with the perfect prototype. However, Tarkin's expression turns to one of suspicion, and he shoots a glare at Ritrin. Clutching the box containing her scalpel prototype, Artine feels a sense of reverence for it, viewing it as a keepsake of sorts. It's one of the creations she's always dreamed of making since her time in captivity. Artine grew up without any skills or formal education, but envisioning the world through the monarch's sight gave her hope and allowed her to plan for a future beyond her confinement. It made her contemplate how she would survive once she was free and what kind of livelihood she could pursue. Without that hope, enduring the solitude would have been nearly impossible during those long years. It's ironic that while the monarch's sight led to her confinement, it also provided her with the means to survive it. Artine also recalls how, during her captivity, the servants assigned to bring her items began spreading rumors that she had lost her mind. Although it was unfair, this ultimately led the emperor to believe she was simple-minded, which worked in her favor. Glancing at Tarkin, Artine feels genuinely grateful to have found such a supportive partner. Meanwhile, Tarkin eyes Retrin and advises him to straighten himself out, leaving Retrin bewildered. Ready to head home, Artine instructs Retrin to complete the remaining work as discussed earlier. Spotting Retrin's shirt oddly clasped with a clip, Artine wonders if it's a new Iugo fashion trend. Retrin, feeling self-conscious about his new style, assures her he'll showcase it once it's finished. Saying her goodbyes to Retrin, Artine feels Tarkin's grip on her hand, his expression annoyed. As they head home, Artine comments to Tarkin that he could have easily sent the court ladies instead of coming to pick her up himself. Tarkin responds that he happened to have some business in the area, hence the coincidence. He also reminds her of the promise he made to protect her from any danger. This makes Artine reflect on Tarkin's concern, considering that the blacksmith is within Tarkin's palace and should be safe. Despite this, Tarkin still insisted on accompanying her. She asks Tarkin if something happened, catching him off guard with her sudden inquiry. Though there might have been an incident earlier, Tarkin insists that nothing happened and reassures Artine not to worry about anything. Artine then expresses her heartfelt gratitude to Tarkin for everything he's done, emphasizing that she appreciates every little thing, from picking her up to helping Retrin secure a position at the blacksmith, and even standing up for her against the queen. Suddenly, Artine opens up about her business, clarifying that it's purely driven by her personal ambition and has nothing to do with Tarkin's ascension to the throne. She promises to repay him for everything, even mentioning paying for the space she's using. However, Tarkin brushes off her offer, surprising Artine. She insists on paying him back, considering it her personal responsibility. Tarkin then affectionately calls Artine dear, gently grabbing her shoulder, and explains that as his wife, this palace is her home, meaning everything within it belongs to her, and she's free to use it as she pleases. Artine asks Tarkin if he doesn't want any payment for it, to which Tarkin nods in agreement. Artine admits that gestures like this make her feel uneasy, surprising Tarkin with her honesty. In her mind, Artine ponders the idea that when they divorce, she won't be able to consider any place as her home anymore. She wishes she could also contribute something meaningful to Tarkin. She gently touches Tarkin's hand and asks him if he truly doesn't expect anything from her. Her question catches Tarkin off guard, causing his face to blush slightly red. Tarkin pauses for a moment, locking eyes with Artine, and simply says he doesn't need anything from her, except for her not to disappear from his sight. The next day, in her room, Artine is busy with her work, her mind still lingering on Tarkin's words from the previous night. She wonders if Tarkin is concerned about his political rival's next move, especially after her confrontation with the Queen. Finding herself lost in thought, she finishes her work earlier than usual, earning a satisfied nod from Jack. These days, Artine has been swamped with work. Once the equipment costs were sorted out quickly, things started running smoothly. Acting as the princess consort, she took over tasks that Jack used to handle in the mornings. Then, in the afternoons, she'd head over to the blacksmith to assist Retrin. Her tasks ranged from figuring out how to organize the iron storage by converting part of the blacksmith into a warehouse to minutiae like comparing the length of scalpel handles with those already on the market. With so many details to handle, her plate was full. Before she knew it, night had fallen, with Artine getting completely lost in her work. Every time she stepped out of the blacksmith, there was Tarkin, claiming he finished work early and stopped by on his way back. When Artine asked if it was bothersome or inconvenient for him, Tarkin brushed it off, averting his gaze and blushing slightly, insisting it was fine. Artine sensed the sincerity in his words somehow. Today, Artine is meeting with Umir, a physician from Tarkin's Palace Medical Center, to discuss her project. Ymir comes off as a bit arrogant, assuming Artine wants a tour, but Artine remains composed and explains her purpose. She then shows Ymir the box containing the scalpels and asks her to try them out. Ymir is stunned by the prototype and wastes no time in excitedly testing it out, feeling like it's a game changer. She explains how it makes surgeries easier and less tiring, as the scalpel is easy to handle and gets the job done effortlessly. Ymir then turns to Artine, takes her hand and kneels down, kissing it. Suddenly, she asks if she can lick Artine's hand, shocking everyone present. Artine promptly declines the request. As Ymir tries to persuade Artine, suddenly one of the patients wakes up and curses Ymir for her actions. Artine can't help but think that there's no shortage of eccentric characters in that place. However, she knows that Ymir is the top surgeon in all of Iugo, having risen through the ranks at a young age and earning Tarkin's trust. The fact that Tarkin entrusts his life to Ymir speaks volumes about her reliability and skill. Still, Artine needs more feedback. Handing Ymir the papers, Artine asks her to check those out too. As Ymir looks over the papers, she's surprised by the content and asks Artine if she's the one who wrote it. Artine confirms and explains that she'd like Ymir to review it for any issues. Ymir is impressed by how systematic and concise it is. The table includes relevant questions, scores, and attempts to objectively describe the scalpel. It even sets improvement goals based on numerical scores. Ymir wonders if Artine plans to keep refining it in the future, given that the scalpel's design is already revolutionary. She observes that with this level of evaluation, even in the event of disputes in the future, doctors won't be able to question the quality of the product. Ymir finds it very intriguing. She excitedly pledges to fill out the form wholeheartedly and believes that other doctors will support and cooperate with it. With a radiant smile, Artine expresses her gratitude. While wandering around, Ymir eventually offers to give Artine a tour of the hospital. She asks if Artine isn't accepting pre-orders for the scalpel. Ymir expresses her certainty in the product and insists on purchasing a significant quantity. This surprises Artine. Ymir reveals that she's the hospital director and sees no reason to hold back on purchasing something that can save lives. Artine is impressed by Ymir's enthusiasm and thanks her for her support. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Melody paces back and forth, clearly worried. She jumps when she hears her name called from behind. It's Rosaline. Rosaline asks if everything is all right, sensing Melody's distress. Melody's frustration boils over as she accuses Rosaline of being a traitor for siding with Artine. Rosaline remains calm and composed, suggesting that Melody must be going through a tough time, especially with Brody. This catches Melody off guard. Rosaline admits her guilt and apologizes, reminding Melody that they are from the same kingdom and can confide in each other. Touched by Rosaline's sincerity, Melody begins to cry as she confides in her. She shares with Rosaline that Brody is in a terrible state. She hasn't washed or eaten for days. Melody expresses her deep concern, fearing that Brody might not make it. Rosaline is visibly shaken as she witnesses Brody's condition. Meanwhile, Brody continues to mutter to herself, cursing Artine for what happened to her face. Rosaline moves closer to Brody, causing Brody to lash out at Melody. Frustrated that she brought Rosaline to her room, she curses Melody, expressing her desire to be left alone. Melody feels scared and struggles to explain herself, but Rosaline intervenes, noticing Brody's trembling. She asks if Brody is feeling unwell, showing concern. Recognizing that Brody feels embarrassed to display this vulnerable side in front of an Iugoan, Rosaline suggests bringing a doctor from their own country to assist her. Brody's anger intensifies and she orders Rosaline to leave, calling her nothing more than a loyal pet to Artine. Suddenly, Rosaline reaches out and touches Brody's face, questioning whether Brody truly believes that she is just a faithful follower of a woman who isn't even a princess and is deemed crazy. As Artine's carriage approaches Tarkin's palace armory, the guards look surprised, speculating whether Artine is there to meet Tarkin. However, they remember that Tarkin has a meeting soon and realize it could be a problem. They hurry inside. In the office, Jack receives news of Aristine's arrival from the guard. He considers it a significant matter since Tarkin has many papers to handle this afternoon. The guard knows that Tarkin keeps his public and private affairs separate and doesn't make exceptions for anyone. He wonders if Aristine is still unaware of Tarkin's nature. Suddenly, the guard suggests that maybe Aristine was so eager to see Tarkin that she used her lunch break to come there. Tarkin becomes more interested and asks for more details. The guard appears nervous as he shares his thoughts, fearing Tarkin might be upset with Aristine. He assures Tarkin that Aristine probably didn't have any bad intentions, just like when he and his wife were newly married and missed each other when they were apart. Tarkin smiles as he listens to the guard's explanation, which surprises the guard. Durante then hands Tarkin his coat and offers to guide him to meet Aristine. The guard can't believe how convincing his words were. As Tarkin gets ready to leave, he deliberately unbuttons his clothes, revealing his broad chest even more. The guard sees this and wonders what's gotten into Tarkin all of a sudden. Mukali, who is also there, beams with excitement upon hearing that Aristine is present, and eagerly joins along. The guard is surprised by Mukali's sudden change in attitude and wonders if Mukali now likes Aristine. Jack then informs the others that they'll continue the meeting later, but they should still address the important matters first. However, the others plead with Jack, expressing their desire to see Aristine as well. Consequently, Jack and the others decide to go see Aristine together. Meanwhile, Aristine steps out of her carriage, followed by her maids carrying the box and a basket of lunch. Tarkin and Durante descend the stairs to greet her, and Aristine calls out Tarkin's name upon spotting him. Tarkin is taken aback, momentarily captivated by Aristine's radiant presence, causing him to pause. In Tarkin's eyes, Aristine's hair gleams in the midday sun, and she appears particularly vibrant today. He also notices Aristine's silk dress, pondering which maid might have prepared it. Observing the basket and wooden box carried by the maids, although he's unsure of the box's contents, it's evident that Aristine brought the basket for a purpose. Tarkin smiles slightly, suspecting Aristine brought dessert for them to share after lunch. Tarkin then looks away, asking Aristine why she's there. Aristine responds, questioning if she's causing him any trouble, and explains that she came because it's lunchtime. Tarkin reassures her that she's not bothering him, as he still has some free time before work. Mukali and the others are surprised to hear this, wondering where Tarkin learned to lie so boldly. They comment that Tarkin, once known as the fearless warrior of the century, who wouldn't flinch at anyone, has completely changed after getting married. Aristine sighs with relief and then asks Tarkin if she could borrow one of his men, Mukali, who seems both disbelieving and worried. Aristine explains that they haven't seen each other in a long time. In a slightly shaky tone, Mukali agrees that it's nice to see her, but emphasizes that Aristine came there to greet Tarkin. Mukali hopes Aristine will confirm this, but it seems Aristine misunderstands, stating that her sole reason for coming there was to meet Mukali. Mukali becomes even more worried when Aristine mentions that she wanted to fulfill her earlier promise to him. Mukali tries to clarify things, but then he realizes something and asks if it's about the final product. Mukali regrets accepting Aristine's promise before, now fearing it might lead to his demise. In a nervous state, Mukali tries to say something, realizing Tarkin must be furious with him, but suddenly Aristine mentions that she brought dessert for him too. Tarkin, who has been silent until now, sharply turns his head, his demeanor darkening, and asks if all the things the maids brought are for Mukali. Realizing his life is in danger, Mukali pleads with Aristine to save him, though Aristine is unable to comprehend what is happening. Sensing Tarkin's brewing anger directed at Mukali, Aristine swiftly intervenes to defuse the situation. Tarkin, unable to contain his emotions, expresses his frustration that Aristine wants to show her project to Mukali before him. Aristine explains that it's because Mukali has been a great help to her, accompanying her to Catalaman. This explanation only adds to Mukali's anxiety. Aristine further elaborates that she promised Mukali she would show him the finished project and invite him for tea. Tarkin, consumed by jealousy, reflects on how Ritran also received special treatment from Aristine, wondering if that's how she treats all her business partners. Taken aback by the question, Artine confirms it, which shocks Tarkin. She then tries to say something else, but Tarkin can't quite make out her words. With a slight blush on her cheeks, Artine admits that she wanted to show Tarkin the finished product, the best one. Though embarrassed, her words instantly stun Tarkin and calm his anger. After that tense moment, Artine finds it hard to turn down others who eagerly show interest in accompanying her to test the product. They seem like comrades ready to save their friend, and Artine feels it would be troublesome to refuse. During the testing, Tarkin examines the list Artine made and asks if she created it herself, expressing his amazement. Artine responds affirmatively and mentions her desire to recruit reliable people to test the product. Suddenly, everyone volunteers eagerly, raising their hands with excitement. Although Artine looks worried, they assure her of their eagerness to assist. Touched by their genuine enthusiasm, Artine smiles brightly and expresses her gratitude, which leaves them swaying with her warmth. However, their expressions change when they notice Tarkin glaring intensely at them. Out of the blue, Artine brings up the statement Tarkin made the night before. Nervously, she expresses her acceptance of what Tarkin offered. Surprised, Tarkin gently smiles and reiterates that his possessions are hers as well, emphasizing that she can do as she pleases with them. Everyone watching feels a warmth spreading from the scene. Artine's maid then enters, bringing dessert for them to enjoy. Tarkin eyes all of the sweets and starts to feel uneasy, as if his teeth are already melting. However, seeing Artine enjoying them, Tarkin thinks they must be pretty good too, though he feels embarrassed just thinking that. Suddenly, Artine offers him a bite of her dessert, catching Tarkin off guard. Unaware that Tarkin really hates sweets, Artine innocently offers him the first bite. The others are equally shocked to witness this unexpected gesture. In the back garden of Tarkin's palace, Melody confides in Rosaline about Brody's condition, expressing gratitude for Rosaline's earlier help. Rosaline reassures Melody that she'll call a doctor for Brody to help her get better soon. However, calming Brody down wasn't easy. Earlier, Rosaline tried to soothe Brody, who was in a terrible state, reminding her that the mark on her face was meant for Artine's face. This tense moment made Melody wonder if Rosaline wasn't on Artine's side. Now that things have calmed down a bit, Melody encourages Rosaline to share her thoughts, admitting that they had thought Rosaline was on Artine's side, which led to them resenting her. Rosaline explains that she thought it was best to find Artine's weakness, so she also deceived her allies. With this explanation, they reconcile and become friends again. They chat about how lucky Artine is to have married Tarkin. Rosaline even suggests that Melody is better than Artine, so she should show her charming side to Tarkin. Rosaline also points out that Artine doesn't know what Tarkin likes and dislikes, or how to take care of him, which surprises Melody and makes her wonder if she could do something about it better than Artine. While they're in the middle of their conversation, DNA suddenly appears. Mentioning that she's known Tarkin for a long time, DNA claims she can tell them what Tarkin likes and dislikes. DNA then reveals that Tarkin hates sweets, and if he were forced to eat them, he would strongly dislike it. Meanwhile, Tarkin can't resist eating the sweet Artine offered him, and once he takes a bite, everyone is shocked, including Artine, who now realizes that Tarkin doesn't like sweet. Artine tells Tarkin to refuse it if he doesn't like sweets and even encourages him to spit it out. However, Tarkin tries to play it cool, takes another sweet, gulps it down, and then collapses. Now everyone thinks that even Artine knows Tarkin is a fool. Artine feels so embarrassed about her mistake, thinking she wouldn't have slipped up like that under normal circumstances. She's been so hyped up lately that she's been acting without even realizing it. She wonders if it's because the weather's nicer, or because the people around are so friendly and sometimes cute. Still cringing over her blunder, Artine tells Tarkin to be honest next time, saying she doesn't want to pressure him into eating something he doesn't like. After saying that, Artine had a realization. She doesn't even know what Tarkin likes or dislikes. Somehow, she felt this urge to learn more about Tarkin, to understand why he's so intriguing and kind, making her want to delve deeper into his world. The next day, King Nevter invites Tarkin and Artine to have tea together. Not wanting to repeat her mistake before offering the king any food, Artine checks if he likes it. King Nevter confirms that he enjoys it, especially when his daughter-in-law feeds him. He remarks that Artine isn't forcing him to eat anything. The king also assures her not to worry because he's being real, unlike the other person. Tarkin can't help but feel a bit embarrassed upon hearing that. The king then asks about Artine's business. Artine, wearing a confident expression, recalls her initial goal stated during their first meeting, to dispel the notion that Iugo is a barbaric country. The king nods approvingly, acknowledging her ingenious plan. However, he adds a reminder that the business should not just create a comfortable scalpel but should also revolutionize the market. Otherwise, it's just a waste of money. While Artine's primary aim is to make a profit, she explains to the king that with Iugo's exceptional metallurgical industry, they have the potential to produce the best scalpels globally. This, in turn, would make hospitals eager to purchase scalpels from Iugo. Artine asserts that with this achievement, no one would dare label their country as barbaric. Hearing Artine's explanation, King Nevter expresses his trust in her. He also cautions Artine that if she fails, the queen will take action. Artine assures the king that she'll ensure she's fully prepared. As the king engages in conversation with Tarkin, Artine turns around, taking in the delightful weather. She feels a sense of relief knowing that the king acknowledges her business endeavors. Somehow, she realizes why she's been feeling so emotional lately. It's because all of these developments excite her immensely. As Artine glances at the nearby pond, the water seems to reveal the monarch's sight to her. In the vision, she sees a future where Retaliation apologizes to her for failing to produce the scalpel. Artine is taken aback, wondering what this vision means and what went wrong. Lost in thought, she doesn't hear Tarkin call her name twice, causing Tarkin and King Nevter to look concerned. Artine tries to brush off her worries with a smile, saying it's nothing serious. However, she continues to mull over what she might have missed, mentally retracing her steps. Suddenly, she stumbles upon a clue that catches her off guard. Concerned for Artine, Tarkin wraps his arm around her and asks the king for permission to leave. King Nevter agrees, advising Artine to take a break. As Artine prepares to depart, the king tells her that enduring or hiding her struggles won't solve anything. He suggests she learn to rely on others and take time to rest. He reassures her that there's no one there to mistreat her, so she shouldn't hesitate to trust and lean on those around her. Artine is surprised by this advice, and even Tarkin promises to shower her with the best things to replace any bad memories. Artine is deeply moved by Tarkin and the king's words. At Tarkin's palace's blacksmith, Retaliation is stunned to hear that they need to start over from scratch. Artine explains that if they continue as they are, the scalpel business is likely to fail. Remembering Umir's mention of purchasing a large quantity, Artine realizes that Umir probably disposes of the scalpel after a single use to prevent infections from rusted blades. Scalpels often come into contact with blood, causing them to rust quickly, so frequent maintenance is essential. While Umir, as a doctor at Tarkin's palace, can afford to use scalpels as consumables, not all hospitals have that luxury. Artine envisions the potential consequences if she doesn't address the scalpel issue, realizing that the queen will put her in a difficult position. It dawns on her the importance of King Nevter's earlier advice about creating a scalpel that revolutionizes the market. Artine confidently suggests that if rust is the issue, they should switch to iron that doesn't rust. Retaliation looks puzzled, claiming there's no such thing as non-rusting iron. Undeterred, Artine tells him to invent it, surprising Retaliation. She assures him not to fret, explaining that she knows such iron exists. While the process might be challenging, Artine believes Retaliation is capable of achieving it. Luckily, Artine is familiar with the type of iron from her previous life, one she often encountered, and the raw materials are detailed in textbooks. It's stainless steel, iron that doesn't rust. After her meeting with King Nevter, Artine delved into her memories and found a solution. She stumbled upon it once in a textbook, an alloy formed by mixing iron with chromium and nickel. However, processing it is a bit trickier due to the varying ratios required for each product. Despite Aristine's concerns about Ritrin questioning her metallurgical knowledge, she confidently assures him that they can achieve it. Ritrin is amazed by her conviction, reflecting on how he used to stumble in the dark, but now finds clarity with Aristine's presence. With her, he feels like the neglected flowers in his heart are blooming once more, and his passion is reignited. Ritrin, filled with newfound confidence, declares that working with alloys is his specialty, and he's certain they can succeed together. Just then, there's a knock on the door, and Aristine's maid rushes in, clearly panicked. She informs Aristine that the scalpel she left in the room has vanished, leaving Aristine shocked and worried. Aristine rushes back to her room to find the scalpel box open, with the scalpel missing. She wonders who would break into Tarkin's palace just to steal it. Aristine starts worrying that someone might copy her design and sell it before she can finalize her improvements, leaving her accused of plagiarism. As she mulls over these thoughts, Tarkin enters, gently taking her hand and reassuring her not to worry. He suggests that the thief might not have aimed to copy the design. Aristine is surprised by his words. Tarkin adds that he'll inform her if anything becomes clear, leaving Aristine even more puzzled. Tarkin urges Aristine not to fret and to concentrate on her tasks. Despite his reassurance, Aristine finds it hard to shake off her worries. With a soft look, Tarkin tells her he can't explain everything at the moment, but asks her to trust him and assures her that the culprit will be caught. Aristine's heart is warmed by his words, instantly lifting her spirits. Just knowing that Tarkin told her not to worry makes her feel so much better. Days after the incident, to Aristine's relief, there's been no news of a new scalpel model hitting the market. Ritrin has begun working on developing the stainless steel as planned. They're in the midst of researching which type is best suited for medical scalpels. Finally, their efforts start to bear fruit. Aristine has completed all the preparations. Even if someone tries to steal her design, she's confident in her ability to handle the medical field. She believes her scalpel will revolutionize the market. Little does she know, someone suspicious is watching her from outside. The next day, after a long day of work, Aristine and everyone are exhausted. Collapsing onto the couch, Aristine feels like she needs a break. She had already told her maid she'd be taking a nap and asked her to inform everyone. Just as she's about to relax, someone enters and calls her name. Aristine is surprised to see Brody there, especially since she had requested not to be disturbed. With a serious expression, Brody mentions that she has something private to discuss with Aristine. Upon hearing that, Aristine senses trouble brewing. Brody remarks on Aristine's recent happiness and questions if Aristine has nothing to say to her. Aristine is taken aback by Brody's sudden accusation. With growing intensity, Brody demands an apology from Aristine, blaming her for the scar on her face, insisting it should have been Aristine who bore that mark. Brody was the one who carried the hot water with the intention of scalding Aristine. If Aristine hadn't had the vision with the monarch's sight, her face would have been even more badly burned than Brody's. Aristine then says she didn't inflict that injury and wonders why she should take responsibility for it. Hearing this, Brody's eyes fill with even more vengeance. Meanwhile, in her room, Rosaline ponders if everything has started. It seems Rosaline enjoys stirring up trouble and adding a little more chaos to Brody's situation. She has her own devious scheme in mind and is biding her time for the perfect moment to act. In Aristine's room, Brody, seething with anger, demands if Aristine ever considered taking responsibility. Fuming with rage, Brody pulls out the scalpel and aims it at Aristine, leaving her stunned to realize that Brody was the one who stole her scalpel and is now attempting to harm her. Fortunately, the guards intervene just in time, restraining Brody. Aristine is puzzled by their sudden appearance. The guards, identifying themselves as members of Shadowhawk, apologize for not reacting more quickly. Aristine wonders when they began escorting her. Suddenly, Tarkin strides in with a stern expression, bypassing Brody, who's kneeling. He swiftly reaches Aristine, gently caressing her face as he asks if she's hurt. Aristine reassures him that she's okay, just a bit startled. Tarkin smiles in relief at her response. He then turns to the guards, instructing them to lock Brody up in the Thorn Tower for daring to harm his wife in front of everyone. Brody is in shock, unable to believe what just transpired. The maid present reminds them all that they witnessed the event. She emphasizes that even though Brody is a noble sent by Emperor Sylvanus, she lacks the power to silence them all. The crimes of theft and attempted assassination against Artine warrant severe consequences, and a lifetime of labor in the Thorn Tower is already a lenient punishment. Brody trembles as she tries to justify her actions. However, she quickly shifts back to anger, blaming Artine for her predicament and hurling insults at her. Artine is taken aback by Brody's reaction, which only escalates as Brody continues to insult her, likening her to a street beggar. Suddenly, Tarkin intervenes, causing Brody to feel suffocated. He instructs the guards to swiftly remove Brody from the premises. Brody, witnessing Tarkin's kindness towards Artine, wonders why he never seems to notice her. She attempted to catch Tarkin's attention by dressing up, wearing the best corset, applying lipstick, styling her hair, and choosing the perfect underwear for the occasion. Despite her efforts, Tarkin passed by without saying a word, completely ignoring her as if she meant nothing. Brody questioned whether it was because of her scar, a sentiment Rosaline also echoed. Frustrated and hurt, Brody screamed internally, questioning why it couldn't be her. After the incident, Tarkin invites Artine for tea to help her relax. Artine asks if he already knew that Brody was the culprit. Tarkin admits he suspected it because Brody came to him with a strange scent, while Artine was working on the scalpel, basically inviting him over for tea. However, Tarkin doesn't recall this clearly. Artine is surprised by this revelation, but Tarkin assures her he ignored Brody's invitation. Artine clarifies that she's not interrogating him. She's just shocked to learn that Brody is more cunning than she realized. Tarkin adds that only a few people can freely enter Artine's room, so he wasn't entirely sure. He tried to gather evidence by involving Shadowhawk, but he didn't anticipate Brody causing such a commotion. At that moment, Tarkin felt he couldn't show violence in front of Artine, so he held back. However, he now wonders if he should have taken stronger action against Brody. Artine glances at Tarkin, questioning why he didn't inform her about Brody potentially being the culprit, considering he wouldn't hold back just because he wasn't entirely certain. Tarkin is momentarily taken aback by her question, his mind drifting back to the first time Artine visited, her once expressionless face now adorned with a smile. Meeting her gaze with his own soft one, Tarkin responds that it was because Artine had started to smile, catching her off guard with his answer. Taken aback for a moment, Artine is on the verge of asking something, but Tarkin swiftly averts his gaze, appearing visibly nervous. Deep down, Tarkin feels uncomfortable whenever Artine is with Retaliation, though he keeps it to himself. However, he elaborates that if he were to bring it up, Artine would likely become more cautious around others because of Brody's actions. He adds that he doesn't like seeing Artine unable to focus on her work, which essentially means he doesn't like seeing her unable to smile freely. Tarkin stresses that his palace is Artine's playground, where she can act freely without any limitations. Artine is taken aback by Tarkin's words, but then she breaks into a bright smile, expressing how lucky she feels to have such an amazing partner. Instead of today being remembered as a frightening incident of being attacked, Artine sees it as a heartwarming memory, thanks to Tarkin's thoughtfulness and warmth, which he has cultivated. Tarkin brings up the time when Artine told him to work harder, surprising her that he still remembers. Despite her surprise, Artine's smile widens as she expresses how she feels lucky to have such a reliable and trustworthy partner. Tarkin blushes, trying to conceal his happiness. In the days following the incident, the newspapers reported that Brody had been sentenced to a lifetime of labor at the Thorn Tower for trying to harm Artine. Normally, she should have been tried according to Sylvanus' laws, but Emperor Sylvanus swiftly disowned her. The public demanded severe punishment, an unprecedented case in Sylvanus nobility. As Artine reads the newspaper in her room, Rosaline interrupts, bringing up the Brody incident. She asks if Artine feels relieved now that Brody has lost her position as Aristine's servant and is receiving sympathy from the people. It's like hitting two birds with one stone. Artine questions if Rosaline orchestrated it all. She realizes that Rosaline was the one who leaked the location of the scalpel to Brody. Rosaline responds by saying she can't let Artine get her hands dirty. Artine realizes that Rosaline isn't loyal to her, especially noting how quickly Rosaline was interviewed after the Brody incident. Artine observes that all Rosaline's mistakes are being pinned on Brody, but it also feels like a warning. If Artine were to cast her aside, Rosaline might spill secrets to the press, blaming Artine for her actions. Artine considers the timing, not wanting a scene right when her scalpel is about to be introduced. So, she turns to Rosaline, compliments her, and hints at repaying her. Those words light up Rosaline's face. Unlike Brody, Rosaline is careful and calculated in her actions, making her easier to predict and control. As Artine looks at the wedding gifts she received, she selects a necklace and places it around Rosaline's neck. Rosaline is astonished by the gift and expresses her gratitude, even suggesting she'll rally the other maids. Artine, while touching Rosaline's hair, plays along, expressing her happiness that Rosaline is on her side and that she trusts her. Rosaline, feeling sneaky, believes Artine trusts her completely, especially given the extravagant necklace with a large diamond. Out of the blue, Tarkin emerges from behind, wondering why Artine hasn't made her way out yet. Apologizing for her delay, Artine explains she got caught up in conversation. Tarkin notices something and strides over to Rosaline, catching her off guard. He reaches for the necklace around Rosaline's neck, his expression serious, and demands to know why she's wearing it. Tarkin fixes a stern gaze on Rosaline, waiting for her to respond. Feeling intimidated, Rosaline stammers as she tries to find an answer. Sensing her discomfort, Artine steps in, admitting that she gave the necklace to Rosaline. Tarkin's gaze shifts to Artine, silently questioning her decision. While Artine simply confirms it with a yes, her expression reassures Tarkin that everything is under control, and she'll retrieve it eventually. Artine then explains that it's a reward for Rosaline's hard work. Implicitly, she hints that she's avoiding a scene, especially with the scalpel's imminent introduction. Tarkin looks at Artine, communicating with his eyes that he'll handle the servant if there's an issue. However, Artine's intense gaze suggests she's capable of handling it herself. They continue their silent conversation, Tarkin questioning why Artine chose that particular necklace from all the wedding gifts. Artine responds casually, saying it caught her eye, which leads Tarkin to conclude that she likes it. Tarkin sighs, while Rosaline watches their interaction with confusion. Blushing slightly, Tarkin assumes Artine's fondness for the necklace. He then removes it from Rosaline's neck, insisting that one isn't enough, and she should pick another. Artine wonders if the necklace is very expensive to prompt such a reaction from Tarkin, but she agrees nonetheless and calls her maids to remove it from Rosaline's neck, though Rosaline tries to stop it. Before Artine leaves, she assures Rosaline that she'll give her a different necklace later on. Rosaline is left reeling on the floor, her hopes soaring and crashing at the same time. She had her heart set on that necklace and wanted it badly. Getting back on her feet, she's now determined to hunt down her prey to reclaim the necklace. And she's set her sights on Melody. Meanwhile, Artine is surprised to learn that the necklace isn't a gift from another country but is actually from Tarkin. No wonder he was so pleased to see Artine's apparent fondness for it. Later that night, in their bedroom, Artine feels jittery as she calls out Tarkin's name. Tarkin, sitting on the bed in his sleeping robe, reveals his toned muscles as he warmly beckons her closer. He assures Artine not to be so tense, noticing her nervous demeanor. With a slight blush on her cheeks, Artine admits it's her first time, but Tarkin continues to reassure her. As Artine tries to make an excuse to leave, Tarkin swiftly catches her hand, but she insists something is missing and promises to return after checking one more time. Tarkin insists she can't do that since the goods have already been delivered. After completing the last check in the morning, the scalpels have been sent out to the merchants. Sales under Artine's name will kick off across Iugo starting next week. The long-awaited scalpels, after all the preparations, are finally ready to step into the outside world. Artine can't shake off her worries, thinking she might have overlooked something. Seeing her anxious, Tarkin calls for the maid to prepare some tea and wraps her in a blanket to keep her from rushing out. He gently guides her to bed, insisting she rest on her favorite spot. Despite Tarkin's reassurance that everything is fine with the scalpel, Artine persists in wanting to check the blacksmith once more. Tarkin soothes her with a comforting pat on the back. But Artine remains uneasy, feeling like there might still be something she's missed. Tarkin's gaze softens as he compliments Artine, telling her she's done an amazing job. Artine feels her cheeks flush with warmth at the praise, surprised by the emotions welling up inside her. As Tarkin lays beside her on the bed, he reassures her once more that everything will turn out fine. Artine finds solace in his words, her worries easing at the sound of his comforting voice. She ponders whether Tarkin's kindness stems from their partnership or if it's simply his nature to be considerate. Caught up in her thoughts, Artine's attention drifts to Tarkin's muscular chest, inadvertently drawing Tarkin's notice. He teasingly asks if she wants to feel his muscles, leaving Artine flustered and embarrassed. In her embarrassment, she accidentally leaves a mark on Tarkin's chest as she instinctively pushes him away. Nervously, she explains her actions, her cheeks still tinged with pink. Tarkin inquires if she's feeling better now, and Artine, attempting to conceal her embarrassment, assures him that she's completely fine. Artine playfully tells Tarkin to cut it out and go to sleep. In response, Tarkin suddenly sits up, leaning closer to Artine, and says that's not the response he was hoping for. Artine is taken aback by Tarkin's unexpected move, wondering if they're getting a little too close for comfort. Tarkin inches his face closer to Artine's, leaving her trying to make sense of the situation. But just as their faces are about to meet, the maid walks in with the tea Tarkin had requested. Startled by the scene, the maid apologizes profusely for interrupting what she assumes to be a romantic moment and hastily retreats, leaving the tray behind. Both Artine and Tarkin are left feeling embarrassed by the interruption. Tarkin suggests they call it a night, and as Artine begins to drift off to sleep, she can't shake the thought that Tarkin might have been about to kiss her. The next morning, Mukali is visibly irritated with Tarkin, who proudly displays the mark left by Artine on his chest from the previous night. Mukali questions Tarkin's motives, knowing full well that the mark could easily vanish if Tarkin infused a bit of his aura into his body. Instead, Tarkin seems to be flaunting it intentionally. Tarkin casually mentions the potential political advantages of having a close relationship with one's spouse, leaving Mukali even more astonished that Tarkin is considering such matters. As they walk, Tarkin suddenly remembers the moment from their first night when he inadvertently mentioned having a lover in front of Artine. In a moment of frustration, he instinctively strikes a nearby wall, startling Mukali. It's clear that Tarkin regrets letting slip such a remark to Artine. Since the rumor about Tarkin and Artine spending the night together has spread among the servants, one of DNA's servants brings it to her attention and asks about her well-being. DNA puts on a smile and tries to act supportive, saying it's a positive development and they should be supportive. But deep down, DNA can't shake the feeling that it's purely physical, especially since Tarkin, who never showed interest in women before, is now indulging in nighttime activities for the first time. Although DNA's heart aches knowing she's not Tarkin's first choice, she tries to reassure herself that eventually, Tarkin will grow tired of this new relationship. She convinces herself that she'll be understanding and forgiving when that time comes. The servant also spills that Artine seems to be still getting to know Tarkin, mentioning how she brought desserts and offered them to him. DNA's taken aback by this, realizing that perhaps the information she shared with the Sylvanas maids didn't make its way to Artine as well. She imagines the embarrassment and heartbreak Artine might have felt if Tarkin had rejected her in such a public setting. DNA puts on a sympathetic expression, regretting that she didn't try harder to prevent it. But the maid surprises DNA by revealing that Tarkin actually ate everything. DNA can't believe it, feeling a chill run down her spine. Even though Tarkin and Artine may be on friendly terms, DNA can't wrap her head around Tarkin going to such lengths. Shaken by the revelation, DNA clings to her belief that she knows Tarkin better than anyone and that his heart hasn't changed, but the news she just heard challenges that belief. Meanwhile, Aristine's maid feels guilty for interrupting Tarkin and Aristine's intimate moment the previous night. She confides in her friend, who suggests changing the flowers in Tarkin and Aristine's room as a way to make up for it. Her friend also informs her that she added some new undergarments to Aristine's closet. Since Aristine will arrive later than Tarkin, the maid decides to change the flowers now. But as she opens the door, she's shocked to find Melody already there, wearing sexy lingerie. They both scream in surprise as they lock eyes. When Aristine arrives, the maid who found Melody in Aristine's bedroom is furious. The other servants restrain her to prevent her from doing anything rash to Melody. She's incredulous that Melody would do something so shameless. Melody, in tears, tries to explain that she heard Aristine was meeting other men and questions what's wrong with her doing the same. Aristine holds her head in disbelief that Melody still doesn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. She then instructs the guards to lock Melody up temporarily. Aristine fears that if this continues, there might be violence, so she isolates her for everyone's safety. The necklace was initially a test to gauge Rosaline's greed, like a collar for a well-behaved dog that only shows its teeth when provoked. However, Tarkin unexpectedly taking the necklace away had the opposite effect. Instead of being a well-deserved reward, the necklace became a trigger for her greed. The next day, Rosaline approaches Aristine with a big smile, congratulating her on Melody being locked up. However, Aristine's expression is serious as she questions Rosaline about her actions during such an important time. Rosaline, feeling irritated inside, puts on a facade of innocence, claiming she didn't anticipate the outcome. She explains she intended to use Melody as bait but didn't expect her to act so quickly. Seeing Aristine's disappointment, Rosaline quickly owns up to rushing her plan, all the while harboring worries about losing her necklace. Rosaline insists that her actions were driven by loyalty to Aristine, placing blame on Melody for causing chaos with her foolishness. She continues to disparage Melody in front of Aristine, who encourages her to elaborate. Rosaline spills the details of her manipulation of Melody, claiming she only bolstered Melody's delusions. However, Aristine interrupts her midway, praising Rosaline and boosting her ego before requesting the promised necklace as a reward. The servant promptly fetches the box, igniting Rosaline's excitement. But upon opening it, she's shocked to find not a necklace, but a pair of handcuffs. Before she can react, the servant secures them on Rosaline's wrists, leaving her bewildered. Aristine calmly explains that they suit her perfectly. Rosaline, visibly shaken, demands to know why Aristine would treat her this way, especially after Rosaline had been willing to do all the dirty work for Aristine's sake. Aristine meets her gaze with a stern expression, stating that true loyalty doesn't come with such easily spoken demands, implying that Rosaline's actions were driven more by greed than genuine devotion. She admonishes Rosaline for attempting to mask her selfishness with supposed contributions, deeming it an insult to those who genuinely support her. Rosaline, initially speechless, eventually declares her intention to meet with a reporter that afternoon, boldly asserting that she, as Aristine's personal maid, holds the power to tarnish Aristine's reputation for integrity. Aristine remains firm and turns to Melody for her perspective, surprising Rosaline even further as Melody emerges from her hiding spot in a rage, now convinced that Rosaline orchestrated everything. Confused as to why Melody is there when she should be locked up, Rosaline looks to Aristine for answers. Aristine warns Rosaline that relationships built on lies are fragile and easily exposed, rendering Rosaline's words meaningless. Realizing she's trapped, Rosaline faces Melody's wrath, who is ready to attack her from behind. Melody vows to expose Rosaline's true nature to Aristine, dismissing Rosaline's attempts to calm her down as she seeks revenge on the traitor. The newspaper spread the news about Aristine's personal maid incident, causing a stir in Iugo. People were understandably furious. Rosaline called in reporters as a desperate move, but Melody proved to be more articulate than Aristine anticipated, rendering Rosaline's efforts futile. Her excuses only fueled more headlines about her. As a result, the insurance strategy became pointless. Before Aristine summoned Rosaline, she reached out to DNA, informing her that Melody had dropped her name and spilled details about Tarkin, including his schedule, to both Melody and Rosaline. DNA's reaction was so intense that even the servants outside could hear her shouting. DNA tried to explain it away as a misunderstanding, claiming she only shared a few tips about Tarkin because she thought they were brainstorming ideas to support Artine. Seeing DNA's anger toward Melody and Rosaline, Artine attempted to calm her down. Artine couldn't help but sympathize, realizing how challenging it must be to have a well-known boyfriend. Artine gives DNA a compliment, causing DNA to blush. Then she asks DNA to testify about the incident. DNA, feeling a bit nervous, agrees with a shaky voice. Apart from the maids, DNA's third-party testimonies added weight to the calls for Rosaline's punishment, growing louder by the day. This news eventually reached Emperor Sylvanus, who didn't seem pleased. All the Sylvanians he'd sent to monitor Artine were now gone. His advisors suggested assigning new supervisors, but the Emperor decided to hold off. He believed Artine was unaware of her personal maid's actions behind her back. To him, Artine seemed like someone who only repeated what she was told, lacking practical skills despite her high-quality education. Emperor Sylvanus seems pleased to observe the strong support for Artine among the people of Iugo. He contemplates that if something were to happen to Artine, it would undoubtedly enrage everyone. He believes this could serve as a catalyst to nullify the peace treaty and dispose of Artine, providing a pretext for war. Thus, the Emperor decides to allow Artine to enjoy her remaining freedom before her inevitable demise. In Iugo during the day, Artine and Tarkin are out and about, drawing everyone's attention. People quickly recognize them despite their attempt to remain incognito. Observing Artine and Tarkin enjoying themselves, onlookers are delighted by their secret rendezvous. Aware of the curious glances from those around them, Artine remarks that being with Tarkin always attracts attention. She comments on how Tarkin effortlessly stands out, even in ordinary attire. Reflecting on their clandestine outing, Artine expresses some frustration, mentioning that she had initially planned to go out with Mukali. However, Mukali had to cancel due to a sudden bout of enteritis. Tarkin softly lifts Artine's chin, noting that in his eyes, she stands out even more, especially with her distinctive silver hair from Sylvanus. Observing the excitement around them, it's clear that people are thrilled to witness their affectionate moment. Artine, feeling a bit bashful, suggests that she might consider using an artifact to change her hair color the next time they go out. They're having this undercover outing because while everyone's focused on the maid's drama, the scalpel has sneaked into the spotlight. Artine's idea was to slip in quietly and gauge the reaction to the scalpel, but things aren't going according to plan. She's wondering why there's more attention now than when they got married. So Artine urges Tarkin to pick up the pace. As they reach the merchant area, a crowd has already formed. Artine halts for a moment when she sees the merchant holding up a picture of her, urging people to queue up properly. The merchant explains that they'll receive a picture of Artine when they purchase her scalpel. It's a limited edition. Moreover, if they buy 3 more items, they'll even get a framed version. Artine is incredulous at the sight, wondering if they're really selling the scalpel. The crowd seems eager, with money at the ready. As everyone spots Artine, they're mesmerized by her presence, and quickly clear a path for her to pass through. Blushing furiously at the praise, Artine grabs Tarkin's hand and they dash inside after politely asking for permission to leave. The crowd expresses their support for Artine and Tarkin, even sharing hopes of seeing their future baby. Artine can't help but feel even more embarrassed by the attention. Inside the trade union, Artine and Tarkin are greeted by one of Tarkin's subordinates who's in charge of his trade union. Artine is impressed by how striking the person appears. He exudes niceness with his neat appearance. However, Artine stares at him intensely, reminding herself not to judge solely based on appearance, knowing that Tarkin's associates can be unconventional. She then instructs him to call her by her name, Rin. With a charming smile, the man introduces himself as Zodiac, the vice president of the trade union named Pink Cat Paw. Hearing that name, Artine is taken aback. She momentarily freezes, then turns to Tarkin, who quickly clarifies that he had no hand in choosing the name. Despite its cute name, Pink Cat Paw's main products are related to demon beasts. Artine can't believe that this trade union is under Tarkin. Artine and Zodiac then argue about the name, with Zodiac stating that the only reason is because it's cute. But before it escalates even more, Tarkin intervenes, instructing Zodiac to focus on their business discussion. Tarkin asks Zodiac why he's selling the portrait. Zodiac explains it's for promotional purposes. Usually, the scalpel is sold to hospitals, but now regular people can see it too because of the effect of Artine's portrait. He also mentions another businessman who's interested in the rust-resistant iron. Zodiac didn't expect such great results, and he states that Artine is loved by everyone here. Hearing that, Artine feels grateful and relieved. However, Tarkin questions Zodiac about the permission to use Artine's portrait for promotion. Aware that Artine holds the real power, Zodiac discreetly informs her that sales have skyrocketed by 14 times because of her portrait. Without hesitation, Artine agrees to capitalize on the opportunity even more. Seeing her swift decision, Tarkin feels helpless. Zodiac then presents Artine with the sales report. As she carefully examines it, she's taken aback, wondering if the numbers are for real. Meanwhile, at the Queen's palace, the Queen gets word about Tarkin's trade union pushing Artine's scalpel. Her right-hand person drops the bomb that these scalpels are outselling even Carandella, the bigwig trade union owned by her own dad, Duke Sciella. They break down how Zodiac's using Artine's peak to hype up sales. Feeling the pressure, the Queen orders her people to keep an eye on every hospital and have backup plans ready if any flaws pop up in the scalpels. The Queen ponders her strategy to bring down Artine, convinced there must be a flaw in the scalpel that she can exploit to attack her. She tries to calm herself down, but her emotions are running wild, and she's feeling worried sick. Suddenly, her maid enters and brings her surprising news. Hamir, her beloved son, has finally returned to Iugo and is already in the palace.